Before we get into the Season 2 recap of Bridgerton, if you need a Season 1 recap, just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. I do warn you, though, I forgot one of the Bridgerton's 8 kids. It's been mentioned in the comments section about 19 billion times, so just ignore it, but it's there if you need it. In Season 2, we have a new season, and 2 of the Bridgerton kids are looking for a match, although neither one is really all that interested. You've got Anthony, who at this point is just settling down to shut his mother up. And you've got Eloise, who she's just of age, although she's dreading it too. Daphne has actually come back, leaving the Duke and her child back at home so she could help out her sister with the whole season. The Featherington girls are also looking for a match after striking out last year. The only one who found a match was Philippa, and she's waiting to marry Mr. Finch, but they still have to pay the dowry, which they don't have. They're waiting for the new Lord Featherington to come over, and they're kind of dreading it. The stories about this guy don't paint a pretty picture. Mrs. Featherington is actually convinced that because of the fact he hasn't shown up yet is an indication that he's punishing them. In order to make ends meet, they might have to start selling off some goods. Now, because they were presented to the Queen last year, they don't have to go through the whole ceremony that Daphne went through and they went through, where you have to go to the Queen and bow and do all that crap. Eloise, however, does, and she is dreading it. She's nervous, she's kind of hyperventilating, and even though Daphne is giving her tips, she just doesn't look as composed as her sister did a year ago. She also has the pressure of what her sister did a year ago weighing on her shoulders. That doesn't help either. But when it comes time for her to make her introduction to the Queen, and by the way, it's not like the Queen doesn't know who she is, it's still a formality, her introduction gets interrupted because Lady Whistledown is back. And as soon as the new pamphlet comes out, the Queen immediately gets distracted and calls it for a day. The city scoops up the newest edition of Whistledown, reading her every word, finding out where she's been, and getting the latest gossip before the season really kicks off. This means a lot of money for Penn. While most of the city is reading Whistledown, the Bridgertons head back to their place, and Eloise continues to learn how to properly dance. Anthony is also preparing, but he's looking at this strictly as a business transaction. He goes through an interview process, just like you would to interview for a job. Although none of the women even come remotely close for his ridiculously high standards. It's not like he's due to take just anybody. He truly is looking for that special somebody. The problem is it's hard to have chemistry with a guy when he's interviewing you. A couple of days after finding absolutely no wife, early in the morning, he's on horseback. He's kind of just sitting there with his thoughts, and then all of a sudden somebody whizzes by him on a horse. He thinks the person's in trouble, and he goes chasing after them until he reaches a roadblock, which they jumped over and he's unwilling to do. And that's when he sees that this person on horseback is actually a female. She kind of gives him a nod like, I just bested you, but he's not deterred at all. He finds a shortcut and catches up to the woman. She doesn't introduce herself, but her name is Kate Sharma. And while she's there for the season, in the moment, she's having just a nice conversation with Anthony Bridgerton. They both have no idea who they are. But right off the bat, Anthony is smitten pretty hard. He tries to escort her back to where she's going, but she has no interest in that whatsoever. When she takes off, he's more intrigued by her than ever. But she's actually staying at Lady Danbury's house. Her mother's an old friend of Danbury. And Kate, along with her younger sister, Edwina, have arrived for the season. Although not so much for Kate, strictly for Edwina. Even though Kate is 26, she's really being an advisor to her younger sister. And by advisor, I mean she's being a total bitch. And I mean that as respectfully as possible. But there's a lot of pressure on Edwina to be the diamond of the season. Danbury knows she can help, while Kate thinks she's got it all figured out. While they might differ in opinion, Edwina has 2 really intelligent women in her corner. Edwina wasn't able to make the initial introductions to the Queen. This was by design by Lady Danbury. She wants to oversee the first introductions between Edwina and the Queen. And that makes Miss Lady Sharma very uncomfortable. That's because Lady Mary was the diamond of her season. That is, until she had the audacity to fall in love with just a common man. She eloped with him to India, and her parents never lived down the shame. Her returning is a pretty big deal. It's quite scandalous. A lot of women never thought that she would show her face there again, but she's back with her 2 daughters. Doesn't mean she's not nervous, though. But she has to get Edwina ready for that night's ball, hosted by Lady Danbury. Everybody's going to be in attendance. But Edwina is quite nervous before she makes her first big appearance. She sits down with Kate and has a conversation because she can tell that really her mom is nervous, which is making her nervous. She's also very concerned with her relationship with Kate. They're not biological sisters, they're half-sisters. Gossip like this could ruin her. Kate, however, promises that Lady Danbury will smooth everything over, and Edwina has nothing to worry about. I mean, after all, Kate has been training Edwina for this moment basically her entire life. She's ready. She tells her, this is the first chapter of a happy story. Don't forget, it's not an appearance or a title that will woo you. It's his mind. That'll catch your eye. They then get dressed and head into the ball. Right away, Lady Danbury starts pointing out potential suitors, but not for Edwina. She's pointing them out for Kate. But Kate tells Danbury that she has no interest in finding a match for herself. She's strictly there to help her sister. She then starts quizzing Danbury on what she's heard about certain dukes and lords, because Kate has done her research on potential matches for Edwina. The queen then walks in and catches Danbury's eye, and she decides to have the introductions with the Sharmas sooner rather than later. Rip the Band-Aid off, which Lady Mary isn't a huge fan of, but once again, you gotta rip the Band-Aid off. And it goes horribly. Lady Danbury makes the introduction, but the queen knows exactly who Lady Mary is. She gives her a snide comment and walks off. While the Sharmas are a little down, Lady Danbury loves a good challenge. As Danbury was having the introductions with the queen, the Bridgertons were showing up. It's the last place that Eloise wants to be, and it's not like Antony's all that interested in being there either, but it's a formality. He has to. He does, however, get really mad at his mother when she proclaims to the entire room that the Viscount is looking for a wife this season. All of a sudden, he is inundated with women looking to add his name to their dance card. The Featheringtons have also arrived. Philippa goes and finds Mr. Finch, but Mr. Finch's parents are also there, and they're wondering where exactly the dowry is so that they can wed their son to Philippa. Mrs. Featherington, not having the dowry at the moment, puts on the waterworks, making up a lie that she just is still dealing with the loss of her husband, hoping that that's going to buy her some time, which it looks like it's going to. As the party's going on, somebody catches Kate's eye, and it's Antony. She recognizes him. After all, she did have a conversation with him a couple hours ago. She asks Lady Danbury, who is that? And Danbury says, oh, that's the Viscount. I don't think I've made an introduction between you two. You have quite the eye, though. He's wealthy, he's well-connected, and he comes from one of the most illustrious families in town. He may be our most eligible bachelor this season. Kate finds him attractive, and so does Edwina. A man then comes up named Lord Corning and asks for Edwina's hand to go take her out to dance. And Kate has to approve of it. Edwina trusts Kate no matter what, and she looks to her for all signs on what to do. It shows how powerful Kate really is in this situation. Danbury has to tell her that that's not the way you do things. You don't turn down dances if you have an open space on your card. Frankly, it pisses her off. And speaking of dance cards, Eloise's dance card is full. Although it's full of fake names. She has absolutely zero interest in dancing with anybody. She'd much rather hang out with Penn. Although Penn is more interested in collecting information for her next edition of Whistledown. But even though Eloise has no interest in dancing with anybody, doesn't mean that Lady Bridgerton is going to allow her to just sit back and be a wallflower for the entire party. She pulls her away from Penn and starts introducing her to people. As the party goes on, Kate cannot take her eyes off the other Bridgerton, Antony. And when he steps outside to get some air, she kind of follows him. Antony, though, sees a bunch of guys that he knows, so he goes over and starts conversing with them, and Kate ends up eavesdropping on the conversation. She doesn't like what she hears. The way that Antony talks about the season and about finding a wife, it leaves a lot to be desired. He doesn't really care about a love match, or at least that's what he tells the guys. He basically talks about finding a wife like you would finding a horse. It completely turns Kate off. She tries to get out of there, but she knocks into a flower pot. It alerts Antony that there's someone around the corner, and it leads to a very awkward conversation between the two. He starts off very friendly, but she starts off very hostile. She admits to eavesdropping on his conversation, although she claims that it was loud enough for anybody to hear. But she makes it very, very clear that what she heard, she didn't like, and she takes off. Kate walks up to Lady Danbury, who's in mid-conversation with Lady Bridgerton, and she tells her, we're leaving now. We were unprepared to handle this lion's den, and we're leaving. It catches Lady Danbury completely off guard. She was actually having a conversation with Lady Bridgerton about the fact that they have common interests, i.e. Edwina, or Kate for that matter, and Antony. So this conversation is a pretty big turnoff, but Kate's not asking permission. She's more of giving a directive. She's not the only one that wants to take off, though. Penelope wants to take off because she has to get her next edition of Whistledown to the printer. Although right before she leaves, Eloise stops her and latches onto her. It's not like Penn can tell her that she has to go, so she's going to have to wait until she gets home that night to head to the printer to get the next edition out. The next day, the next edition of Whistledown does come out, and a lot of it has to do with Antony, and if he's really ready to settle down. But the big crux of the issue has to do with the fact that the Queen has yet to name a diamond. Whistledown states that if the Queen doesn't do it, maybe she's going to have to do it for her, which pisses off the Queen, because she is hell-bent on finding out who Whistledown is this season. The entire town is reading Whistledown. They're also getting ready for the next party. The Bridgertons call the modiste to help with Eloise's dress, and as the modiste is leaving, she runs into Benedict. Benedict is thrilled to see the modiste. The modiste, however, is kind of weird with him. Very short. When Benedict asks if he will see her later that night, she says she's busy with work. Oh, God, I've heard that before. It's always an excuse. They're never busy with work. They're busy with another guy. Anyway, I'll move on. The awkward conversation is seen by Antony. So when Benedict sits down, he asks, what was all that about? Benedict, however, switches the topic of conversation immediately, asking if Antony's entire game plan is just to insult every girl that's available until there's none left. That way, he doesn't have to marry. Antony doesn't want to have this conversation, so he tries to leave, but his mother is right behind him and grabs him. She starts trying to find out if maybe her son is interested in any of the women that he was talking to. She starts mentioning, well, this girl was nice and that girl was nice, but the fact is, Antony isn't interested in any of them, especially the women that his mother's mentioning. He tells his mother in not so many words that he doesn't appreciate the women that were pushed in front of him. What he's looking for is perfection, and he simply hasn't found it. And the fact that his mother is pushing women on him that he doesn't consider perfect is making him question his mother's taste, and her decision-making for that matter. I mean, after all, this is going to be the future woman of the household. His mother, however, is concerned that at the end of the day, he's going to end up alone. Now, down the street at the Featherington household, Penn is extremely stressed out. The stress of getting caught as Lady Whistledown is starting to get to her. When Prudence comes in and notices that she's been writing, Penn gets super nervous that she's going to be found out. Prudence just says that she's been writing to Colin Bridgerton. And her mom has to come in and explain that Colin Bridgerton is not her friend. While Colin Bridgerton actually is her friend, what her mother's really trying to say is Penelope is wasting her time on this dream that she's going to end up with Colin. I mean, after all, Colin is gallivanting through the world. It's quite frustrating for Penn. She's not the only woman in town that's frustrated. Lady Danbury is also frustrated with the person that's living in her house, Kate. She knows that Kate has been going on morning rides, even though Kate has been trying to hide it from everybody. Kate has done a pretty good job, but Lady Danbury tells her, I know everything that goes on here. She then pulls out correspondence to Kate's grandparents, but Kate lets her know, those aren't my grandparents. I have no relation to them whatsoever. But even though they're not Kate's grandparents, they are Edwina's grandparents. Lady Danbury tells her that the real reason of the conversation is to figure out why Kate didn't tell her the real reason why she showed up with her sister. She wants the truth. After all, she's been extremely kind to an old friend, and now she's got a woman living in her house that's lying to her. There's something fishy with this story. Kate eventually comes clean. She tells them that the grandparents never recovered from the embarrassment of their mother moving to India and marrying a common man. After her father died, her, along with Lady Mary, did the best they could to raise Edwina so she wouldn't know about the struggles they were actually dealing with. But because of it, they went broke. They actually used the last of their money to get into town to get to Lady Danbury's house. The grandparents, who are the Sheffields, have agreed to put a sizable dowry to Edwina and have agreed to also look after Lady Mary if they find Edwina a suitable husband. And by suitable, it means somebody with rank and title. That is why Kate is so hyper-focused on who is talking to her sister. While she tells her sister it's about love, in her mind, that's just a bonus. This is about her mother surviving. Lady Danbury tells her, your sister does have a right to know. It is her future. But Kate says, no, that's why I shield her from this. If she knew about this, she would marry the first guy she met very quickly just to please us. Edwina deserves a chance to find love, although she better find love with somebody with a nice title. Lady Danbury realizes they really do have their work cut out this season. The next night, they have the next party. Lady Danbury escorts Lady Mary, Kate, and Edwina back up to the Queen, saying hello to her. The Queen is as rude as she was the previous night, but all the Sharma women keep their head held high. Lady Danbury tells them, go have some refreshments, and then she has a private conversation with the Queen, and she spends it selling the Queen on making Edwina the diamond of the season. Edwina, though, has some competition. Despite her best efforts, Eloise has her introduction with the Queen. The Queen does apologize for having skipped over the introduction a couple days ago, which, by the way, it was fine with Eloise. But when she tells her that she has some big shoes to fill because of last season with Daphne, Eloise makes a comment that she's not into diamonds anyway, she's into emeralds. It kind of takes everybody off guard, but the Queen loved it because the Queen loves emeralds. It makes Eloise think that she really does have a chance of being named the diamond of the season. She runs off and starts panicking to Penn about the whole situation. She can't believe the Queen likes her. She confides in Penn that the stress of living up to Daphne from last season is getting to her. She knows that every time she walks into a room, they're comparing her to Daphne. It sucks that she just can't be herself. But as those two are having that conversation outside, inside, the Queen is announcing her diamond. And it's not Eloise. To everybody's shock, it is Edwina. Because Edwina was named the diamond, it catches Antony's eye. And he runs up to get the first dance with her. Because it's a Viscount, he's able to. As Antony is getting acquainted with Edwina, he starts conversing with her, and she is just what he was looking for. She's well-spoken, she is interesting, she is perfect. While those two are dancing, Kate is thanking Lady Danbury, but Lady Danbury tells her, I hate to break it to you, now the real work begins. They might not have to work too hard, though. Antony and Edwina are smitten. But when Kate sees Edwina dancing with Antony, she's completely against it. She rips Edwina away from the conversation and tells her sister, you are not to go near that man again. Everybody then goes home, and when the Featheringtons get home, there's a bunch of suitcases in their foray. That's because the new Lord Featherington has arrived, and he was not as advertised. Lady Featherington had made him out to be this old, decrepit, angry guy, and in fact, he's a lot younger. That's because the guy that she was describing, he didn't show up, his son did. And he couldn't be more unlike what she described. He's already paid the dowry, so Philippa can get married. And it seems like he really is going to provide for them. In episode 2, now that the Queen has announced the diamond, Kate has made a list of her top choices for Edwina to marry. And Anthony Bridgerton is not on that list. News of how difficult Kate is being through the process has made it to Whistledown, and she writes about it in her latest pamphlet. The fact that she left off Antony does not go unnoticed by Lady Danbury or Lady Mary for that matter. They think it's an oversight, but Kate makes it known. It's no oversight. But just because Antony is not on the list now doesn't mean he's willing to give up. He does think Edwina would be perfect. Later that day, since she has been named the Diamond, she has pretty much every guy lined up outside of her door to get a word with her. One of those guys is Anthony Bridgerton, although he doesn't really wait in the line. He wants to skip it because, after all, he is a Viscount. When he shows up, Kate tells him, you're way too late. You gotta go to the back of the line. He's not interested, though, in speaking to her right then and there. He wants to escort her to the horse races later in the day, but Kate tells him she's already got an escort. He starts asking about the next day and the day after that, and every time he asks about a different day, Kate shoots him down. Kate actually finds it hilarious that Antony has decided to show up after what she heard the other night and what she's read about him. But he's simply not willing to give up. As Antony was trying to find his future wife, his sister, Eloise, has her nose buried in a pamphlet, a Whistledown pamphlet. For a little bit there, she was anti-Whistledown, but after Whistledown's previous pamphlet kind of stated that the whole situation was ridiculous and how women are judged on things that aren't their minds, Eloise is back on board, which is music to Penn's ears. She starts talking to Penn about how she knows that she can convince Whistledown to write something meaningful, but her mother just wants her to find a husband. Penelope starts backing up Lady Bridgerton on the matter, and then all of a sudden, to her shock, Colin Bridgerton walks to the door. He's not the only one who returns, though. Right behind him is Antony. And he's excited to see his brother, but more so because of the fact that they can head to the races as a united front, the Bridgerton family. And no, it's not because Antony wants to spend time with his family. He has a plan. Penelope decides to head home, and when she does, there's a new artwork display on the wall, right as you enter the house. It's guns and antlers. Very American. Lady Featherington ain't feeling it. As Penelope, Mrs. Varley, and Lady Featherington are looking at this monstrosity, the new Lord Featherington, or Cousin Jack as he's going by, comes down and tells the women, get dressed, we're going to the races. Most of the town is there, and that includes Kate, Lady Danbury, and Edwina. Edwina's companion that day is a guy named Lord Lumley, who's all about poetry. But as they're walking along, a guy named Thomas Dawsett comes up, and he wants to be introduced to Miss Sharma, but not Edwina, he wants to be introduced to Kate. Kate is definitely flattered. The two start walking together, and he starts asking her questions about her life. But she does get distracted when she notices Anthony Bridgerton lurking. The Bridgerton boys, however, get called away by Will Mondrich. He's done fighting, and he's decided to open up his own business. It's a gentleman's club. And no, I'm not talking about like a strip club. I'm talking about a place where guys can go and hang out. He invites the Bridgerton boys to stop on by, although they're already a part of a gentleman's club called the Whites. Benedict is all for going. Anthony, though, has his eyes set on Edwina. And as Edwina and Kate are sitting with their escorts, Anthony makes his move. As soon as he walks up, both Lord Lumley and Dawson stand up and pay him respects. The fact is, a Viscount's approval means a lot. All of them are happy to see him, except Kate. Dawson introduces himself to Anthony for the first time, and Anthony is nice enough to him, but he turns to Edwina and lets her know that he was unable to greet her this morning because he was spending time with his family for breakfast. It's something that they love doing, which is a complete lie. When Kate kind of puts down the Bridgertons, Lord Lumley actually sticks up for him, saying that there's no greater family in the area. And in fact, him and his mother have wanted to come by the Bridgerton household and enjoy tea there for quite some time, which Anthony says, we'll make that happen. He then is able to convince Lord Lumley to go get lemonade for Edwina. It frees up a spot for Anthony to sit right next to her and start whispering sweet nothings in her ear. Because of the fact that she doesn't like Anthony, Kate gets extremely impatient, and when Lumley takes a little too long for her liking to bring back refreshments, she makes mention of the fact that maybe Anthony should go and look for him. Anthony, though, says, no, I'm not doing that, not with the race about to start. Edwina asks Anthony his opinion on who will win the race, and when he gives it, Kate scoffs at it. And to be fair, Kate's opinion isn't just a guess, it's well researched. As those two kind of argue about who will win the race, a couple rows back, Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury are talking about the fact that Anthony has squirmed his way next to Edwina, although Lady Danbury does mention there is a roadblock and her name is Kate. There's also another roadblock. Edwina wants a love match, and everyone knows that's something that the Viscount doesn't really care for. It's going to be up to Lady Bridgerton to maybe change the Viscount's mind. A little while later, Lumley comes back with the refreshments, but Anthony doesn't leave. They just make room for Lumley to sit down. Lumley knows exactly what Anthony did, although he can't really say anything. He just has to sit there and now share his date with him. They sit down, the race begins, and when the horse reaches the finish line, it is the horse that Kate said would win that ends up taking first place. Kate doesn't let Anthony live it down. She starts gloating about it. It's a little awkward, so Edwina tells Kate, does that horse not remind you about the one that I used to love when I was a little girl? Kate remembers the one. And Anthony says, oh, well, take my arm. We'll go down to see him. The three of Anthony, Edwina, and Lumley go ahead. And Dawson asks Kate, why do you feel the need to jab at Bridgerton? She tells him that it's her duty as an older sister to make it difficult for the Viscount. And Dawson says, he doesn't like to lose, not even back at Oxford. And right then and there, Dawson realizes he screwed up. Earlier in the day, he acted like he was meeting Bridgerton for the first time, but now he's admitting that he went to Oxford with him. Kate is now convinced that Dawson isn't actually interested in her. He was planted there to distract her so that Anthony could weasel his way next to Edwina. Dawson tries to state his case that he actually is interested in Kate, but the damage is done. She quickly goes and finds her sister, who is still with Lumley and Anthony, and tells Edwina, we're leaving. Right before they leave, she turns to Bridgerton and says, do not speak to me or my sister ever again. So it was a pretty drama-filled day for Anthony. His brother, however, Colin, is back in town, and he's chatting up Penelope because when he was away, she was really the only one that kept corresponding with him. She says to him that he must have been lonely on the trips, and he says, no, I was never alone. Before Penelope can even find out who he was with, Eloise runs up and grabs her. She has impeccable timing. Eloise thinks she's found a breakthrough in the Who is Lady Whistledown mystery. She found a pamphlet that looks an awful lot like the pamphlet from Whistledown, so now she's convinced that she's found the printer. Penelope, though, tries to get her off the case. It doesn't work. Eloise goes to that printer, and it's in the sketchy part of town. When she talks to somebody who works there, he blows her off. He tells her that he doesn't know who Whistledown is, and she needs to get lost. When she continues to ask who Whistledown is, he starts mocking her about the fact that she's after gossip. She tells him that his assumptions are completely wrong. She's not after Whistledown for the gossip. She's after Whistledown to make her a better writer. After all, Eloise is an intellect. So, the printer shows her exactly what he just printed. It's not a Lady Whistledown pamphlet. It's a women's rights pamphlet. So unfortunately for Eloise, it looks like the trail has gone cold. The next day, Lady Danbury, Edwina, and Kate get called to the Queen's palace. The Queen starts talking to Edwina about how difficult it truly is to be the diamond of the season. She's got to be ready for people to come at her with false intentions. She warns her about rumors, how dangerous they truly can be. What she wants from Edwina is when these people come looking for information, she wants Edwina to let her know. She never mentions the name Whistledown, but that's who this all is about. And when both the Queen and Lady Danbury tell both girls to go off and look at the grounds, she admits as much to Danbury. One of the big reasons why she made Edwina the diamond of the season is because of the fact that Edwina has no idea who Whistledown is. She's literally a clean slate. The Queen plans to use Edwina to find out who the true identity of Whistledown is. Around the same time, not too far away, Anthony is fencing with his brothers, and he's venting about the fact that Kate is all but blocking his chance at marrying her sister. Colin suggests maybe he just switch gears, find a new girl. But to Anthony, finding a new girl is like admitting defeat. It's something he's not willing to do. At this point, it's not even about Edwina. It's about winning the battle between Anthony and Kate. He decides to go visit Edwina, but he doesn't come empty-handed. He brings a gift, a grown-ass horse. As Edwina, Kate, Lady Mary, and Lady Danbury are talking about how they're going to have another soiree so Edwina can meet a couple more of her admirers, Kate looks outside and sees Anthony and is able to get to him before Edwina. She yells at him, saying, "Did I not make myself clear? I told you never to talk to us again." He tells her, "You don't even know me." And while she doesn't know him personally, she feels like she knows who he is and his type. And it's not somebody she wants marrying her sister. He tells her, "You do realize that every woman in London aspires for the kind of marriage that I'm offering, right?" And the problem is, yes, Kate knows that, but she wants her cake and to eat it too. She knows that her sister needs to marry somebody of Anthony's stature. But she also wants a love marriage for her sister. Having both, that's tough. Only a Daphne can do that. That doesn't mean that she's not going to search for that. Anthony, though, tries to remind her that this isn't about her. It's about what her sister wants. And her sister breaks up the uncomfortable conversation. When she sees Anthony's gift, though, she's less than thrilled. He thought a horse was a good idea because of what she mentioned at the races. The one horse reminding her of one from her childhood. But she tells him that horse was in a book. She's nice about it, but it becomes clear to Anthony that his gift didn't really go over all that well. Anthony then heads home, and that night he's doing some work for the family when he overhears his mother, his sister, and Colin leaving. He gets curious, and his mother says, "Yeah, we're going to the soiree. Did you not get your invitation?" And Anthony, of course, did not get an invitation. That was by design by Kate. Immediately, Anthony takes it as an insult, and Lady Bridgerton goes and says she is looking for a love match for her sister, and you've made it clear of your disdain for such a thing. Maybe you'll choose your words more wisely this time. They then head off to the soiree where it's become all but a talent show. It was supposed to be a poetry reading, but guys are just showing up and trying to flaunt their skills, but there's more of a lack thereof. Two women that are actually finding humor in the fact that none of these guys are all that talented are Kate and, surprisingly enough, Eloise. Even though Kate knows that Eloise is Anthony's sister, because of the fact that Eloise holds herself as more fun, down-to-earth, doesn't have such a stick up her ass like Anthony does, Kate loves her. She actually says, "I kind of think more about him now that I know he's related to you." There's a little bit of a lull in this talent show, and that's when Penelope walks up to Edwina and compliments her on her dress. Edwina returns the compliment, and at first, Penelope thinks that she's making fun of her because her dress is bright yellow. But Edwina makes it clear, "No, I actually really do like it." The two don't talk for long because Penelope notices Colin Bridgerton, so she makes a beeline over to him. She needs to get her answer on who exactly Colin was spending his time with when he was traveling. And he says, "You were right. I wasn't exactly lonely on my travels. I started a real conversation with somebody I knew for a really long time, but after everything that happened with Miss Thompson, I realized I didn't know this person at all." Penelope, of course, thinks he's talking about her. No, he's talking about himself. And to make it worse for Penelope, he says, "I have you to thank. Your letters were so encouraging, and I thought, if Penelope can see me this way, then why can't I see myself this way?" He then reveals that he's sworn off women since the whole Miss Thompson situation. And when Penelope says, "Well, I'm a woman," he puts her in the friend zone, saying she doesn't count. You just gotta feel for the yellow-dressed damsel. And while Pen was getting put in the friend zone, her mother was trying to dig for some dirt on the new Lord Featherington. And she was trying to do it through Lady Cowper. Because the new Lord Featherington plans on marrying, and it's got Lady Featherington very paranoid. She thinks that whoever he marries, they're going to kick them out of their own house pretty quickly. She doesn't get much information, but she's definitely concerned. One person who has yet to arrive at the soiree is Anthony. And that's because, one, he wasn't invited, but two, he needs his brother's help. He heads to Mondrich's club, where he knows Benedict is hanging out, And as Benedict is in mid-conversation with an artist, Antony demands that he come outside and help him. At first, he just wants help on how to read poetry. But as his brother is explaining poetry more and more, he throws out an off-the-cuff poem right from the top of his head, and it's great, so he has him write it down. He then heads off to the party where he does have stiff competition. I mean, Lumley is out here just throwing it down. Antony is actually the last one to go. He showed up just in the nick of time. And while Kate doesn't want him to go, pretty much everybody else does, and he riles up the crowd enough to allow him to go. He starts to pass off Benedict's poem as his own, but he stops and says, I can't do this. This isn't me. I could stand here and pretend to be something I'm not. I may not be able to offer the display of passion that you truly deserve, but I assure you that when it comes to action, I'll never be found lacking. And I would hope that would speak louder than any poem ever could. When Antony leaves, Kate tries to use what he said against him, saying, you hurt him, Edwina. He can't give you what you deserve. And Edwina shoots back, does that make him a bad man or an honest one? Edwina then promptly walks up to Antony and starts chatting him up. For the first time, it seems like Edwina kind of did what she wanted to and not what Kate wanted her to do. Kate gets so annoyed that she has to walk away, and Lady Danbury notices it, so she goes to check on her. Kate starts bashing Antony to Lady Danbury, saying that she'll make sure of it, that Edwina never marries that guy. Danbury tries to give her some advice. When you try to do stuff like that, show people the light, it's annoying and it never works. Kate doesn't really take that advice too well. She tells Danbury that she doesn't care what she thinks or anybody thinks, and as soon as Edwina's married, she's heading back home with vowing to never set foot in the city again. They start discussing how sad it is that Kate is content with being alone. Kate saying that she's more content with knowing her sister will be taken care of. And when Kate brings up how content Lady Danbury is, Danbury gets offended, saying, I've lived a life. I'm a widow. I was in love. You aren't me. And if you continue down this road, you're never going to be. The next day, the latest edition of Whistledown comes out. As Penn and Eloise are hanging out, Eloise is reading it, and she notices that every single K is a little bit messed up. This is how Eloise plans on finding out who exactly Whistledown is, but since Penelope is hearing this, she knows she has to get the printer a new K in order to get Eloise completely off the scent. When she heads to the market and buys it, she ends up getting seen by the modiste, and she completely runs away in a panic. But the modiste is the least of her concerns, because the queen is onto her. She had her spies follow Edwina and see exactly who she was talking to, and it's not a long list, and Penelope is one of those girls. In episode 3, the Bridgertons are planning on having their big party of the season. They have it every single year. They basically invite the entire town, and they have it at their summer home, Aubrey Hall. But before that, they decide to invite Edwina, Kate, and Lady Danbury just for a few days so that Edwina can get acquainted with the family. Edwina knows that this is a big weekend for her. If everything goes well, she'll be engaged when she leaves. But before they arrive, the Bridgertons all get together. That includes Daphne. Daphne has brought her newborn, Augie, and after she hands off Augie to her mom, she starts talking to Antony about how the season's going. He lets her know that things are going so well with one particular girl that he's invited her to the house for the weekend. She's great. Her sister, she sucks. Antony then tells all of his brothers and sisters that they're supposed to help him win over the hearts of not just Edwina, but also Kate as well, because she has such a big say in who Edwina marries. Daphne kind of chuckles and says, well, seeing as you were such a help to me in my season, how could I not help you out? They then get word that the carriage with Kate, Edwina, and Lady Danbury have arrived, and Danbury is first out. She's so excited to see her great godchild. Lady Mary and Lady Bridgerton then say hello to each other. But the first person that Antony talks to isn't Edwina, it's Kate. Antony notices that Kate has brought her dog, and Kate says, yes, Newton is an excellent judge of character. And that's because Newton is barking at Antony. He tells her, well, rest assured, by the end of the weekend, I'll have won you both over. They get interrupted when Daphne walks over and says, you must be Miss Edwina. And Antony is horrified. He lets her know, no, this is her sister Kate. Edwina then walks over, gets introduced to Daphne, and then everybody starts heading into the actual house. But right before they enter, Antony pulls his mother aside and says, I think I'm going to need the ring from you. Lady Bridgerton goes and gets it, but she wants to make sure her son is certain of his decision. She's worried that maybe Antony is rushing things and he should get to know Edwina before he makes such a big decision. He doesn't really need to do that. He knows that Edwina would make the perfect Viscountess. He also finds his mother amusing because she'd wanted him to marry for years, and now that he's ready to marry, she wants to make sure that he's got a, quote, clear mind. As those two are discussing his possible engagement, Daphne is outside showing Edwina and Kate around. Mainly, a game they all play called Pall Mall, which I'm just going to call it croquet. There's probably a difference, but I'm calling it croquet. Hit thumbs down for that editorial change. But this is a big tradition with the Bridgerton kids. They get together, they play this game, and it gets extremely heated. Daphne starts telling Edwina and Kate about everybody's strategies and what to look out for. They then all come out, and it's time to actually pick your mallet. They start arguing about what order you get to pick, and Daphne says, well, the only fair thing to do is let our guests pick first. Edwina picks hers, but when Kate picks the, quote, mallet of death, everyone starts looking at each other because that is known as Antony's mallet. He is absolutely fuming, but he has to hold himself in a higher standard as not to turn off Edwina. Kate, however, sees right through it. She knows that it irks the Viscount. They then start the game. And as all the kids play, Lady Bridgerton and Lady Mary start talking about the children. But they also have another common bond. They're both widows. As they're getting acquainted with each other, Lady Danbury walks up. And both Lady Danbury and Lady Bridgerton start discussing their love match from the previous year and how that was a success. And maybe this year's matchmaking will be an even bigger success. That, of course, being Antony and Edwina. And that's because Edwina is acing every single test that she's been given. Although it's not like the family is putting her through the ringer or anything like that. Back over on the field of play, the group comes to a conundrum. Kate's ball is right next to Antony's. The rules state that you can try to bash your ball through the wicket, or you could hit an opponent's ball farther away from a wicket. Kate knows this. So she asks Antony, what should I do? Are you in a mood to lose? And Antony has to act like he won't be bothered if Kate hits his ball. So Kate smashes the crap out of it through the woods, and now the only way he can continue to play is to go retrieve it. Edwina is then up next, and she hits her ball into a bush, but she doesn't really feel like playing anymore. The competitive nature of all the Bridgertons have kind of turned her off to the game, because in her words, this is just a game. So she bows out, telling Antony, have your fun, but I'm going to go back to the house and enjoy some refreshments. The next Bridgerton up is Colin, and unfortunately for Kate, Colin's ball is right next to Kate's, and he does the same thing Kate did. He smashes her ball right into the woods, the same woods that Antony's ball was headed into. Now, both Kate and Antony have to head into the woods to retrieve their balls, and it seems like Colin knew what he was doing when he did this. Both Kate and Antony are not happy about the situation, but they get even more pissed off when they see where their balls landed, a mud pit. Kate starts saying that they could pull the balls out and no one would be any the wiser, but Antony says, I would know. He feels like this may be one of Kate's tests to see his morality, and in fact, it was, because she admits that as soon as they got out of there, she would have told on him. Antony's a little hesitant to get in the mud, but Kate isn't. She ruins her shoes, her dress. She gets right up in there and hits her ball out. Antony wants to save face, so he also gets in there, ruining his boots and hits his out. Antony's able to leave the mud with no problem, but Kate gets stuck. Antony reluctantly tries to help her out of the mud, but they both end up falling into it. At first, he's kind of pissed off, but then they just have a good laugh about it. When they finally climb out, all dirty and disgusting, Antony asks, what do I have to do to win your approval? And she explains that she's not doing it out of spite, she just wants to steer her sister to the best possible match. She thought that he would understand since he has sisters. He says, then let's put that behind us. Allow me to prove this weekend that I can provide your sister all the happiness she deserves. So they agree on a truce, but their balls are still right next to each other. And Kate hits his in an unfortunate location. She doesn't know it, but it's the location of his father's memorial. Because Aubrey Hall was where his father died. Of all things, a bee sting. That's right, his father was Macaulay Culkin from the hit 90s movie My Girl. Now, this probably happens more than you think, but still. Yeah, so he died of a bee sting, and that's why Aubrey Hall has always been an emotional place for Antony to go to. It's where he watched his father die, but it's also where he became the Viscount at the age of 18. So when Kate hit his ball over to the memorial that she can't see, he just stopped playing entirely. She eventually goes over to retrieve the ball and sees the memorial and feels like an idiot. Antony heads inside, gets dressed in, clean clothes, and then has a one-on-one with Edwina. It's not quite a one-on-one, though, because Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury are over in the corner eavesdropping, but the conversation between Edwina and Antony goes great. They really hit it off. They bond over their differences. The fact that Edwina loves to read and the fact that Antony doesn't. That night, as they're getting ready for bed, Edwina starts telling Kate all about how perfect Antony is. And when Kate starts bringing up how Antony must have just talked about himself the whole time, Edwina corrects her and says, no, he asked about me. He asked about my interests. He asked about the books I didn't read. It does make Kate think twice about her preconceived notions on Antony. They are unaware, by the way, that outside Lady Danbury is eavesdropping on the conversation. And right down the hall, Lady Bridgerton is doing the same thing to Antony and Daphne. But Daphne has the same questions that her mother did about Antony rushing into this relationship. She's worried that her brother isn't actually in love. They don't want to come right out and say that, so the way they word it is, well, if you're sure, we just want to make sure you're making the right decision, but if she gives you that feeling, and Antony doesn't know what Daphne's talking about. So Daphne describes the feeling of when you burn for somebody. The more and more she describes it, the more Antony realizes he doesn't get that feeling with Edwina. But the fact is, he's not looking for a love match anyway. He's looking for someone to be comfortable with. So at the end of the day, that feeling that Daphne's describing doesn't matter to him. Outside of the room, Lady Danbury makes her way downstairs as Lady Bridgerton is walking away from the door. And Lady Danbury gives Lady Bridgerton the biggest cheesing smile. The next day, as Kate is having tea on the veranda, Eloise comes out to read. And since they have a good relationship, she confides in Eloise that she might have upset Antony during the game. And because of where the ball was, she knows it must have involved something with her father's grave. She explains to Kate that Antony doesn't really go there much at all. Eloise then returns Kate's question with a question of her own. Was it Kate's choice that she never got married? Because everybody tells her that you'd rather die than be a spinster, but then there's Kate, who seems completely content with her status. Kate explains that it is difficult because the world isn't accepting of an unmarried woman. Eloise says, well, that seems to be society's flaw, not a woman's. And that's something that they both agree on wholeheartedly. But it's ironic that the conversation about Antony avoiding his father's grave was even brought up, because in that moment, he decided to go visit the grave for the first time in God knows how long. As he's staring at it, his mother walks up with some flowers to put at the base of it. His mother then sits him down by a bench because she can tell that she's being troubled by this decision. He should be happy, but he's not. He says, I'm fulfilling my duty to this family. And she says, well, your father did that, but he was also able to be in love. She thinks that deep down, Antony does want that, even though he says the exact opposite. He seemed to be on that trek until his father died. Then a wall went up. And that's the issue. When Antony's father passed away, he had to deal with it. He was the new Viscount. His mother was able to grieve and mourn. And he tells her, you don't remember it, but I do. Antony never wants to feel that way again, thus he's not allowing himself to fall in love. He then walks off and they get ready for dinner. And everybody's there, including Colin and Benedict. And Benedict is tripping balls on something else. Colin brought back some powder that is some form of 1800s drug, and Benedict took a whole bunch of it. So he's in another world. He's acting a little out of hand. So in order to get everybody's mind off of what Benedict is doing, Lady Danbury and Lady Bridgerton say it's time for a toast. Or if anybody else has any pressing matters. And what they're alluding to is Antony proposing. Antony stands up and he's about to. He's making a speech, but then he looks over at Kate. Kate is not approving. When it comes time to actually ask the words, will you marry me, Antony doesn't. He makes up a quick excuse on the spot, acting as if this was never going to be the question, and it breaks Edwina's heart. That night, as she's getting ready for bed, she cries to her sister that she must have done something wrong. And Kate is explaining to her that you did nothing wrong, and there'll be plenty of other guys. But Edwina's big concern is, when everybody shows up for the party in a couple days and they find out that they're not engaged, guys are going to start to wonder what's wrong with her, and she's never going to marry. The only thing Kate can do is try to console her sister and remind her that, in the end of the day, she's the diamond of the season. Everybody's after her. While she is dealing with bad news, right down the hall, Benedict is getting some good news. One of the reasons why he took this hallucinogenic is because he's stressed out. He applied to an art school, and he needed to get his mind off things. The hallucinogenic definitely did that. But then he receives the acceptance letter, and he loses his mind. He freaks out in joy. As he's screaming out the window, Eloise mentions how Benedict is going to be as insufferable as Colin is, because Colin hasn't shut up about his journey since he's returned. She asks him, if it was so great in Greece, why didn't you stay? And then he reveals, it's because of Miss Thompson. He asks how she is and if Eloise ever hears from her, and Eloise corrects him and says, oh, you mean Miss Crane. Let's not forget, she's married. But she's also not far away. And that's one of the reasons why Colin returned. Miss Thompson has been living rent-free in his head. The next day, Antony is out by the garden and Kate strolls up on a horse. She tells Antony that her sister isn't feeling quite well. And Antony tells her, I didn't mean to disappoint Edwina last night, but rest assured, she won't be disappointed for long. I still plan to propose. Last night just didn't feel right. They then start arguing about his decision, what he's doing, if he's toying with the emotions, and then he notices that a bee is flying around Kate. He freaks out. He tells her to stop, and she doesn't think anything of it because it's a bee. Even when the bee stings her, she doesn't think anything of it, but he starts hyperventilating. In order to calm him down, she grabs his hand and puts it to the bee sting, which is a little bit above her chest. She starts assuring him that he needs to calm down because it's only a bee sting, but their lips are getting closer and closer. They get super close to kissing until a hoarse neighing snaps them out of it. They then run away from each other and think about what they almost just did. But all of this was going down at Aubrey Hall. Back in town, the Featheringtons were dealing with an issue. Mrs. Featherington is definitely concerned that the new Lord Featherington is going to find a new woman and cast them out. So they need to stop that from happening. They start planning on finding a woman that is simply too dumb to get them out. And then she walks right in. It's Prudence. They explain to her that she will have to seduce the new Lord Featherington, which Penelope finds extremely gross because he's their cousin. But Lady Featherington starts selling it to her about how Prudence will be the new lady of the house. The whole time, though, she's just thinking about herself. But in order to seduce the new Lord Featherington, they're going to need new dresses. So they head to the modiste. The problem is the modiste starts making a dress that is normal. Mrs. Featherington wants to slutty up Prudence. The modiste isn't really willing to do it, so they head across the street because there's a new modiste in town. As Lady Featherington and Prudence leave, Penelope stays behind because she has to address what happened in the market. She starts kind of trying to explain why she was there, lying the entire time. But to her surprise, when she says, "You might have seen me," the modiste says, "No, I don't recall." The modiste can tell that Penelope is extremely uncomfortable with this conversation. She tells her a lady's business is only her own. She then leaves the modiste and head over to meet with her mother and her sister. Later that day, Operation Bangin' Your Cousin is a full go. Lady Featherington is even teaching Prudence how to attract him. Doesn't really work, though. When Lord Featherington walks in, he doesn't pay them any mind. Lady Featherington tries to get Prudence involved in the conversation, but she fails because she's an idiot. As he's leaving the room, he mentions to Lady Featherington how he's going to invite Cressida and her mother over for dinner, which Lady Featherington wants no parts of, but she doesn't have a choice. So the dinner is set up, and it is awkward. Lady Cowper is making the case for Cressida to marry Lord Featherington, and Cressida is doing a really good job of selling herself. All the while, though, Lady Featherington, on the other side of the table, is trying to insert Prudence into the conversation, and that doesn't work. Lord Featherington asks Cressida if she wants to hang out the next day. The next day, a new edition of Whistledown comes out. And there's not a whole lot of gossip, other than the fact that there's a new modiste in town, and everybody is flooding to her shop to get dresses, which is leaving the modiste that we know and love on the outside. She's losing business. This was even brought up at the dinner by the Cowpers, how the old modiste's dresses were simply that, old, tired. So in the latest edition of Whistledown, she points out that Cressida Cowper looks horrible in the new outfits. And while Madame Delacroix's dresses might be old, they're timeless. As the modiste is reading this, in walks Penelope. She explains to her that it is her job to be observant, but also to hide secrets, and she's really good at that. At this point, they both know what Penelope's secret is. But keeping that secret is becoming more and more difficult. Penelope knows that it's only a matter of time before somebody else catches her at the market, and they're not as quiet as Madame Delacroix. That's why she thinks that they can work together. Madame Delacroix helping her get the Whistledown pamphlets out. In return, Whistledown is going to write glowing things about Madame Delacroix. And it's already working. 2 women come into the store, and they need assistance. So now we have a partnership. In episode 4, the Bridgertons are getting ready to host their annual Hearts and Flowers ball. Just about every single family is invited to the soiree. Obviously, the Schwarmers are invited, but they're already there. Edwina is feeling a lot better. She thinks she realized why Anthony did not propose to her. It's because of Kate. She's noticed that Kate hasn't been quite herself since the bee sting, and Kate starts thinking maybe she's on to me. Maybe she knows what me and Anthony almost did. But Kate is definitely surprised when Edwina says, "He hasn't married me yet because of you and your relationship with him. You guys hate each other." So she begs her sister to help her get that proposal. They, along with the Bridgertons, wait for everybody to arrive. The families all arrive, and it is customary for Lady Bridgerton to greet them all one by one. And as she's doing so, Daphne is right by her side. But Daphne can't help but mention to her mother that She's concerned her brother is making a rash decision. Daphne doesn't feel like Antony really knows Edwina at all. So if Antony isn't going to get to know Edwina, Daphne will on his behalf. One of the people that Daphne and Lady Bridgerton do not greet is Penelope. She's in great spirits ever since coming to an agreement with Madame Delacroix. Madame Delacroix has been able to use her skill set to get Penelope's words to the printer, doing so hiding them in a dress that's delivered to him. The only issue they have is the printing apprentice, a guy named Theo, who, by the way, is the same guy who put Eloise in her place, finds it weird that the printer is getting a dress delivered to him and sees the printer pull out the paper. But, hey, for the time being, everything's going great. Penelope runs up to Eloise and Colin and finds out, though, that Eloise is still on the hunt for Whistledown. But it's a little bit of a mixture of both. Yes, Eloise does want to find out who Whistledown is, but she took the paper that Theo gave her about women's rights, and she loves it. She's been following it along. It's a real radical movement in the time. But as Penelope is making the case that the printer is not connected to Whistledown, she gets more concerned because it seems like Eloise is getting a little too cozy with this printing apprentice, Theo. Not too far away, as Edwina is talking to Antony, Kate walks out and gets called over to the table by Edwina. It's pretty awkward interaction between Kate and Antony. After Edwina tries to force some small talk out, Edwina brings up how Kate and Antony should hang out, and Antony brings up how he's busy. He's going shooting with the other guys. When Edwina brings up how Kate is an excellent shot and Antony scoffs at it, Kate, who doesn't want to hang out with Antony, takes offense to it, saying, "What, you don't believe me?" And the answer is no, Antony doesn't. He thinks that maybe Kate aims straight in the field, but when it comes to actually killing animals, she would fail. And you can't blame him. The fact is, a lot of women that time don't hunt. But because Antony is so dismissive, Kate bullies her way into going. She's the only woman to go on this hunt. And during the hunt, Kate notices that the animal tracks are leading in a completely different direction than the hunt is heading. She mentions it to Antony, but Antony blows it aside, saying, "We'll follow everybody else." The more they go deeper in the woods, though, the more empty-handed they're coming up. They're not finding any animals. It gets to the point where Kate decides, "Screw this, I'm doing this thing on my own," and walks off. Antony, not wanting anything to happen to her, follows her. And it seems like Kate is onto something because she hears a deer not too far away. She gets in position to shoot it, and as Antony is yelling at her, he notices that she's holding the gun incorrectly. He goes to fix it. They get super close. They once again come close to kissing, and then it gets interrupted when the rest of the hunt says, "Oh, there you are." And they have to act like none of that ever took place. They then continue on with the hunt with the rest of the group. As they're trying to kill some deer, Edwina, Daphne, Lady Mary, and Lady Danbury are busy playing cards. The more Edwina talks about what she wants in a match, though, the more Daphne realizes that's not Antony. Edwina then tells Daphne about her plan to get Kate and Antony to like each other. She truly thinks this is a perfect plan. While those women are playing cards, everybody else is playing some sort of activity. That includes Lady Featherington and Prudence. Lady Featherington tells her daughter that she has one more chance to seduce Cousin Jack before everybody starts calling Cressida Cowper the new lady of the house. She really tries to hammer home the point that this weekend is huge for them. Now, one person who is absent from this is Colin, because as soon as Colin found out that Miss Thompson lived not too far away, he planned a trip out there. When he arrives, he sees the cold, hard reality. Miss Thompson is holding her baby, Oliver. They get caught up. Everything seems to be going okay. But then Miss Thompson's husband shows up. Now, Colin has one foot out the door. He's ready to leave. But when the topic of Greece gets brought up, Colin gets all chatty. Turns out that Miss Thompson's new husband, Lord Crane, has some books and drawings on botany from Greece. So he says, "You must stay. Have dinner with us." Marina tries to say, Colin probably has to get back. But Colin says, "No, I've got nothing to get back to," and does end up staying, looking at the drawings and really hitting it off with Lord Crane. When it actually does come time for Colin to leave, though, Crane gives Marina and Colin the time alone together to say their goodbyes. And Marina calls Colin out on his actions, saying, "So you just showed up here to befriend my husband? Why did you come?" And Colin tells her that he came to apologize. He didn't like how he ended things with the two, and he's forgiven her. But she tells him, "You don't need to do either. You don't need to apologize for me, and you certainly don't need to forgive me because I don't seek that." But the real thing that Marina tells Colin is to get over it. He's super focused on the past that she thinks that he can't look ahead to the future, because that's something that she has done. She's content with her life. She never thinks about what could have been. That's the past. As Colin is leaving, Marina tells him, there are those in your life that you already make happy. You have your family. You have Penelope. And Colin says, Penelope? Marina tells him, seek those people out because your future will not be in the past with me. He then is forced to head home, alone. And he's not the only one who arrives back late at night. So does Kate and the rest of the hunting group. As soon as she enters the room, Edwina starts grilling her on how it went. And Kate doesn't want to get into details, so just to shut her sister up, she tells her, I think it went well. She never once mentions the close call, but it does keep her up at night. Well, that and the thunderstorm outside. She can't sleep, and she decides to go into the library and start looking at books. But Anthony, who also couldn't sleep, was walking by the room, saw the light on, and popped in. He walks up to her and says, these books were my father's most cherished possessions. She then asks, how did he die? And he looks at her and says, a bee sting. And she feels horrible. He starts talking about how difficult it was for him to see his father, a great man, get humbled by such a small creature. But then he starts giving her that look. You know that look. And he starts getting closer with that look. And she's returning that look with her own look. They get snapped out of it, though, when thunder strikes, and they both go back to their rooms. The next day, the Bridgertons and their staff continue to get ready for the party. That includes Daphne and her mother. And Daphne starts telling Lady Bridgerton how great Edwina is. She knows what to say. She knows how to stand. She knows all of that. But the fact is, Daphne always imagined Antony was somebody more like himself. Edwina is nearly perfect, but at the end of the day, Antony is a Bridgerton. And Bridgertons like challenges. Edwina isn't that. So after talking to her mother, Daphne decides to go talk to her brother about the situation. But when she starts to pry and point out that they don't really have anything in common, he basically tells her to mind her own business. They then all get ready for that night's party. When Edwina does show up, Antony takes her for her first dance, but she's not the only one who's going to be dancing because Lady Bridgerton is hell-bent on getting Eloise a husband. She invited this random guy that Eloise has no interest in dancing with, but she goes along with it. He starts asking her questions, but when she shows even a hint of intellectual ability, he says, how about we get out of here and, go spike the punch bowl. And she's so turned off by him that she ends up walking off the dance floor, which is a horrendous look for not just him, but also for her mother. When her mother tries to step in, Eloise stands up to her, telling her, I know I'm a disappointment to you, but just let me take my leave and go to bed. But Lady Bridgerton is not the only mother that's meddling. So is Lady Featherington. She instructs Prudence to go wait in the orange room. And then she walks up and interrupts a conversation between the new Lord Featherington and Cressida, telling the new Lord Featherington that there's a guy looking for him in that room, and he wants to talk to him about business or something. She then waits a little bit and escorts a trove of people to that room, where they catch the new Lord Featherington and Prudence alone. This is completely taboo. Lady Featherington acts mortified. She makes it out to be like the new Lord Featherington was making moves on Prudence, even though he wasn't, he denies it. But since there are witnesses, Prudence is now bound to him, and he knows exactly what Lady Featherington was up to. He knows that she planned this all along, and so does Penelope. She tries to talk to Prudence about the situation. Prudence doesn't think it's a big deal. So what? The guy got conned. In fact, the only thing she cares about is Lady Whistledown writing about it in her new pamphlet. Penelope tries to explain to her that if Whistledown writes the full story, it won't just ruin Prudence, it'll ruin the entire family. They could be run out of town. But Prudence thinks that this is just Penelope being jealous that Prudence will be in Whistledown and Penelope won't. She has no idea she's actually talking to the real Lady Whistledown. And Prudence does have a good point, even if it's by mistake. How would Whistledown even know? She has no idea, but she's basically calling Lady Whistledown's bluff. As Cousin Jack is getting scammed back out on the dance floor, things are going great between Antony and Edwina. They've danced twice, which is a really good sign for Edwina. But Edwina wants Kate to dance with Antony because she figures that Antony is going to want to ask Kate's blessing if he's going to propose. Kate doesn't want to dance with Antony because things have gotten really awkward with the two lately, but she's all but forced to. So the two head out on the dance floor. And Antony does ask for permission, but Kate asks, can you make her happy? Antony doesn't say a word, and Kate points out, your silence is speaking volumes. Are you starting to reconsider? And Antony poses the question, is that what you want? You want me to reconsider? Kate then reveals that it doesn't matter what she wants, because she's returning to India the moment that Edwina marries. And this is coming as shocking news to Antony, and he doesn't take it well. Kate explains that this was the plan all along, but the way that Antony looks at it, It's as if Kate is abandoning her sister. He ends up storming off the dance floor, and Edwina goes and questions her sister on what the hell just happened. Kate has to act like she has no idea, but she goes and tracks down the Vi account immediately to have a further conversation about this. She finds Anthony in his father's library stewing over it. He can't believe that she's going to leave, not even concerning herself with finding a match of her own. And she can't understand why he cares about that. The conversation then weirdly segues into why Kate doesn't like Anthony. But then they start giving each other that look. You know that look. And they get closer and closer, and they're about to kiss until Daphne walks in. And it's not a good look for the two. Although Daphne can commiserate because Anthony did the same thing to her last season. He races after Daphne to explain that wasn't what it looks like. They first get into an argument about the difference between the situation that Daphne just witnessed and the situation that Daphne found herself in a year ago. The difference in Anthony's eyes is the fact that he's a guy. Finally, Daphne has had enough. She can't keep quiet, and she points out that it's obvious to her that Anthony has a thing for Kate. She begs him to just be honest with himself. And she even goes so far as to use the L word, love. He looks at her, nods, and says, "Then I know what I must do." The next day, everybody gets ready to leave, but before the Featheringtons head off, Lord Featherington lets Lady Featherington know that her plan is a bust. He plans on marrying Prudence, just as he promised, and just as Lady Featherington wanted it. But she should know that Prudence is marrying a penniless man. He had talked about all these diamond mines that he had in America, but in reality, those were complete and total bust. When Lady Featherington says, "You paid for Philippa's dowry," he says, "Yeah, with a promise of a ruby necklace. I have no money. The only way to keep this family afloat was to marry into money. Somebody like Cressida Cowper. So, way to go." While those two are having a private conversation in a room, on the outside of that room, Penelope runs into Colin. They start talking about his meeting with Marina, and maybe this could finally be the opportunity that Colin needs to move on. And Colin tells Penelope, "Even though Marina said she was content, I just can't shake the feeling that if Whistledown didn't write her gossip, things may have turned out differently for her. But I guess there is no use on dwelling of the past, so I will focus on the future." He then leaves. And so does everybody. Edwina and Kate are about to get in their carriage, and Edwina is saying, "We did everything we could to get this engagement, but I guess it wasn't meant to be." And Kate, having been pressured by Lady Danbury the previous night to tell Edwina about the fact that she needs to marry into wealth, is about to. But then Anthony runs out, gets down on one knee, and pops the question. Edwina excitedly says yes. In episode 5, Anthony and Edwina get the Queen's blessing to have the wedding, but she demands that they have it at the castle. Someone like Anthony Bridgerton marrying her diamond, that's a huge deal. Anthony thanks the Queen, but also tells her that's not necessary. What also isn't necessary is that look that Kate keeps giving Anthony, that my mind is telling me no, but my body is telling me yes. But the real reason why the Queen wants to have it at the castle is because she wants to finally figure out who Whistledown is. If it's at the castle, then that's the biggest story going on in town. She'll have all of the girls that she's come to the conclusion could be Whistledown followed, and they're even planning on putting out false rumors to see which ones come back. But that's not the only wedding that's going down. You also have the wedding between the new Lord Featherington and Prudence, which is stressing Lady Featherington out. She's once again broke. She's facing having to fire the same people that she just rehired. And when Cousin Jack walks in the door, he says, "You've no one to blame but yourself. If it wasn't for you, we'd be living comfortably on Cressida's dowry right now, but you had to meddle. If you would just call this ridiculous engagement off, we could salvage it." But Lady Featherington tells him, "No, I can't do that to Prudence. It would break her heart, and her reputation's already been ruined. It's far too late for that." So it's back to the drawing board. He's got to think of something. Down the street, the Bridgertons are getting ready for a dinner that night with the Schwarmas and Lady Danbury to welcome them into the family. When Lady Bridgerton brings up to Eloise that she's going to need her help, Eloise says, "Sorry, Mom, I can't. I'm attending a lecture tonight." She doesn't want to tell her that it's an intellectual lecture on women's rights, so she tells her that it's about floral arrangements, claiming that Lady Featherington is forcing Penelope to go, so she's going to keep Penelope company. In reality, she's planning to go solo. A couple of rooms down the hall, Anthony, along with the jeweler, are waiting for Edwina and Lady Mary to arrive. They're supposed to go over ring sizing, but the two women are running late at the modiste. Kate went ahead because she wanted to go and have a conversation with Anthony about why he is proceeding to go along with this, especially after what happened at Aubrey Hall. But Anthony reminds her, nothing happened at Aubrey Hall. Yes, something almost happened, but almost is still nothing when you look at it. The conversation is a little awkward, but it gets even more awkward when the jeweler asks if she has the same sized hands as her sister, which she does. So with Edwina running late, the jeweler puts Edwina's ring on Kate's hand. And when Edwina and Lady Mary do finally show up, there's Kate wearing Edwina's wedding ring. It's really only uncomfortable for Kate because she knows what her and Anthony are currently going through. Edwina is too clueless to realize. As Kate is trying to get the ring off, Lady Danbury walks in and tells them that she's received word from Edwina's grandparents that they're in town and they want to come to the dinner that night. Edwina is thrilled. She's never met her grandparents. Kate and Lady Mary, on the other hand, they're not looking forward to that at all. Because of this news, Lady Mary is suddenly not feeling well. There's a little bit of a party in a park, but she no longer wants to go. Neither does Kate, but Lady Danbury all but makes her. And on the walk over, Kate asks Danbury, how could you invite them? You know what they did to my mother. And Danbury says, I do. That's why I'm not going to answer their impoliteness with impoliteness. Besides, isn't this what you wanted? Edwina to be in the good graces of the Sheffield family? Reclaiming the fortune you so desperately need? And Kate admits, that is what I want, but not until after the wedding. That's because Edwina is still in the dark about everything. And Kate also knows that if the Bridgertons were to learn about this, they might feel a certain way. And Danbury looks at her and says, I kind of think that you'd like that if the wedding got called off. Kate tries to play dumb with Lady Danbury, but Lady Danbury's too smart. She reminds Kate that they're engaged. In the eyes of society and the Queen of England, they're as good as man and wife. Only an amazing scandal would prevent this marriage from going down. And a scandal like that would send alarms through the entire town. It could be a stain from which the Sharma family would never recover from. Only a fool would jeopardize the marriage. So in a nutshell, Lady Danbury tells her, back off, Edwina got there first. Right at the end of this conversation, Mr. Dawsett walks up. He wants to make amends with Kate. He does find her attractive, even if he was sent by Anthony at the races. He asks Kate if she wants to go around the lake with him, and when Kate says, I'm rather tired, Danbury says, oh no, she'd be delighted to. Both Dawsett and Kate walk right by Anthony, Lady Bridgerton, and Edwina on their way to the lake. And while Lady Bridgerton and Edwina think it's great that Kate is finding somebody, Anthony cannot take his eyes off of him. He's sending daggers at Dawsett, as if to say, like, get away from my girl. He stares them down their entire lap around the lake. And while Kate didn't want to go, she ends up having a really good conversation with Dawsett. Even when Kate mentions how she's planning on going back to India, Dawsett seems more than willing to go with her. But when the two arrive back on the dock, it is Anthony who is waiting there for Kate to help her out of the boat. Their hands, however, are holding for an uncomfortably long period of time. When Anthony realizes it, he steps backwards, he trips over Newton, and takes him and Dawsett into the lake. It's quite embarrassing. Not too far away, one of Anthony's friends, Mondrich, arrives along with his wife, and Mondrich does not want to be there at all. He wants to be back at his gentleman's club running things, but his wife reminds him, we need gentlemen to be in the gentleman's club, and they're all here, so you need to network. The problem that Mondrich has is he's still known as just a boxer. At least, that's what Cousin Jack knows him as. As soon as Mondrich walks up, Jack introduces himself, but then immediately goes into Mondrich's boxing career. It kind of pisses Mondrich off, and it's his wife who actually has to invite Cousin Jack over to the gentleman's club, which he appreciates the invitation. But then Lady Featherington walks over and pulls him away from it. She starts chastising him for not finding a solution to their problem yet and just chatting it up with guys at gentlemen's clubs. And he returns it by saying that she continues to run up massive bills at the modistes, so maybe she should start thinking of an idea herself. Now, two people that aren't there are Benedict, who is at school, and Eloise. She went off to that lecture. When she gets there, she's like a kid in a candy shop. She's overwhelmed, looking all over the place, but then she sees a familiar face. It's Theo, the printing apprentice. She walks up to him, and he's pretty surprised that she's there. They start busting each other's chops, but it's all in good nature. It seems like they're getting along quite well. Penelope, though, didn't go. And that's because Penelope wasn't invited. She found out that Eloise was going to this lecture from a conversation with Colin, and she wants to get to the bottom of exactly what Eloise is doing because she's concerned that Eloise is tracking down exactly who Whistledown is. She heads on over to the Bridgerton household where Eloise tells her, oh, I'm sorry, I can't go on our walk today. So on her way out, she asks one of the maids where Eloise went, and the maid gives her the address. She then heads home, where her mother has called for the jeweler. Jeweler is checking out a ruby necklace, and when Cousin Jack walks in, he gets very uncomfortable because he knows that it's fake. He's kind of pressuring Lady Featherington to stop, but the jeweler continues to appraise it. And the jeweler gives it the all clear. He believes that it's real. When he leaves, Cousin Jack walks up to Lady Featherington and says, "What are you doing? Those stones are fake." And Lady Featherington says, "Exactly. If we just fooled that guy, we just might make it out of this season." This conniving idea turns Jack on a little bit. He's into it. Now, right before that night's dinner at the Danbury household, Lady Bridgerton has to have a conversation with Anthony. The way he's acting, it's as if he's going to get his taxes done and not getting married. He tries to let her know that the love match between her and his father was the exception, not the rule. But she wants him to experience love. She feels like he's making a mistake. And she tells him, if you think you are, then you have to call it off now. But he says to his mother, what I want isn't important. I can't back off now. I couldn't do that to Edwina. And she says, you're correct. You can't. You're a gentleman. But a woman could. I mean, it happens all the time. Women get cold feet. If Edwina were to call off the engagement, nobody would find fault with her. You wouldn't be dishonoring her. It's a win-win. He, however, looks up at his mother and lets her know that she doesn't want to end the engagement. And she asks him, does Edwina know your true feelings on the matter? Even though both people in the room know that this is a mistake, Anthony is dead set on going through with it. In the other room, the soon-to-be bride is also getting prepared for that night's dinner, and she's excited, not just to meet her grandparents, but also for the idea that she will be the Viscountess. Her sister is not all that excited. She just wants to get the hell out of town and forget all of this went down. But with Edwina's grandparents moments away from arriving, Kate feels like this should be a good time to tell Edwina the truth. The problem is, she's out of time. Right before she can tell Edwina, Lady Danbury comes in to let them both know that the Sheffields are downstairs. They head downstairs and the Sheffields greet their granddaughter and they act like they didn't abandon the entire family. Kate, they completely ignore. They also treat Lady Mary like an outcast. It gets even worse at dinner. When they start talking about estates and what they like to do, somehow Lady Sheffield spins it to start bashing Lady Mary and start bashing Kate's mother. It gets extremely awkward. Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury see what's going on, so they try to get the conversation moved elsewhere, but it doesn't work. Lady Sheffield cannot harbor her resentment for her own daughter embarrassing them years ago. And it gets to the point where Lady Mary can't take it anymore and fights back. When Lady Sheffield brings up that they were robbed of having their granddaughter for years, Lady Mary says, you have 2 granddaughters and you had every opportunity to spend time with them. You didn't. I was cast out by the only family I had ever known. But you know what I learned? I learned that you actually did us a favor, because when you cast me out, you taught me that I could raise my daughters far from your constant judgment and demands that they should chase wealth over love. We don't need your wealth. And Lady Sheffield cracks up at that statement, knowing the agreement she made with Kate. The problem is, nobody else other than the Sheffields and Lady Danbury know about that agreement. This is coming as a complete surprise to Lady Mary, Edwina, and the Bridgertons. When Lady Sheffield continues to go in on Lady Mary and Kate, Anthony steps up to the plate and says, I've had enough. You have failed to show the proper respect for the Sharma family, and I'm not going to stand for it. Lady Mary has done an amazing job raising her daughters. They're eloquent, they're kind, loyal, and a credit to both of their parents. And since you clearly don't wish to jeopardize your social standing, I suggest you leave, and don't bother waiting for an invitation to the wedding. You're not getting one. He kicks the Sheffields out, but he's also pissed off. So is Lady Bridgerton. They also feel like they've been duped, and they take off. Kate runs after Anthony to explain that Edwina had no idea, and he says, that became obvious. This was all you. Now we just have to call off this wedding. Nobody needs the headaches involved with this. But I won't call off the wedding. That would do Edwina a disservice. So Lady Danbury and my mother will come up with a plan, and Kate cuts in and says, there will be no plan. What did she do to you? Why does she deserve this? And Anthony says she doesn't. It's you. He starts telling Kate how he never wants to see her again, how there's no point in the world that could be far away that would suffice. But the more that he's telling her how much he hates her, the closer the two are getting. They come really close to kissing. Neither of them asked for this, but they both clearly want it. Anthony, though, is a total tease. He steps back and reminds Kate that if he weds Edwina, it would bind him and Kate for eternity. And he's going to spend every day wanting Kate, dreaming of Kate. Eventually, he knows he's going to give in to temptation. He then gets the hell out of there. So it was not exactly a pleasant dinner party. But hey, it was at least a party, which is something that the Featheringtons weren't even invited to. Their mailbox is empty, which is unheard of for them. They're a well-respected family in the community. Lady Featherington goes to complain to Cousin Jack about this, but the conversation, though, goes from how they have no plans to the business that Lord Cowper wanted with Jack. It all has to do with these ruby mines. But the problem is those ruby mines are worthless. There's nothing in them. And Lady Featherington says, take his money. He doesn't know that. Get them to invest. Our fortune will be restored. Prudence will have a great wedding. And I won't have to suffer the disdain of this town again. Once again, Jack's liking this conniving style from Lady Featherington. Late that night, down the street, Edwina can't sleep. She's too annoyed. Kate comes in to apologize and explain her side of things. Edwina's annoyed, but she does tell Kate that they don't need the Sheffields' money. When she marries Antony, she's going to have plenty of it. And she knows that Antony will take care of Kate as well. Kate doesn't want that, but the more that Edwina talks, the more that Kate realizes it's not going to be easy to talk her out of this engagement. She really is in love with Antony. The next morning, Kate goes on one of her horseback rides, and to her surprise, Antony shows up. He lets Kate know that he's decided he's going to talk to Edwina and find a way to end things that day. When the engagement's off, him and Kate are never going to see each other ever again. Kate starts sticking up for her sister, and Antony's taken back because Kate's been against this marriage from the start. And Kate yells, I was wrong. I'm not going to be the cause for you losing your honor any more than I'm going to stand for Edwina being in pain. You once saw her as your perfect match. You will find your way there again. You have to marry my sister because this feeling that plagues us, it's going to pass. Before you know it, it'll be as if we never felt it at all. After hearing this impassioned speech, Antony agrees to go along with the wedding. And lastly, we have our first sex of the season, and it's Benedict. He ends up having sex with the nude model at school. Good for him. She is attractive. In episode 6, the queen gets ready to host that wedding. The only real big concern she has is that the king's wing gets locked. She doesn't want anyone finding their way in there and seeing him in such a sad state. She's also convinced that this day will be the day that she finally finds out who Whistledown is. But one person is getting nervous. That's Edwina. The closer it comes to wedding day, the more she's realizing that maybe the Viscount isn't into her as much as she's into him. One of the things that she points to is the fact that the Viscount doesn't really look at her very long. But Kate and Lady Mary end up talking her out of it, saying that's ridiculous, don't read too much into it. To Antony, though, this is nothing more than fulfilling his duty. The whole town is getting ready to attend this wedding, including the Featheringtons. And this is going to be step 1 in Lady Featherington's scheme to con just about everybody out of their money. Prudence is going to wear one of Cousin Jack's fake ruby necklaces. Since she already kind of brings a lot of attention upon herself, she's going to tell everybody where she got that necklace. That should lead to a bunch of husbands and guys at the wedding to find their way to Cousin Jack and want to invest. When Lady Featherington explains this to Cousin Jack, he all but admits that he has a thing for her, which is a little bit awkward since he's planning on marrying her daughter. Penelope is also planning to attend the wedding, but first she has to talk to the modiste. She calls for the modiste to meet her at the Featherington household, which is a risk because there's no reason for the modiste to be there. She's not delivering a dress. She starts asking the modiste what exactly she knows about Theo Sharp, but the modiste doesn't know anything. And it's such a curious question that the modiste starts to get concerned that there's something bigger involved. And she can't risk that for her business. Penelope reassures her that there is nothing bigger. And when Lady Featherington comes down and sees that the modiste is at her house, the modiste is forced to come up with an excuse on why she's there and head on out. Now it's just time to get married. Antony is at the Bridgerton household and he's all ready to go. Edwina is at the castle getting dressed. Everybody shows up at the castle, including Lady Danbury, who walks up to Lady Bridgerton and makes mention of the fact that they haven't talked since their awkward dinner with the Sheffields. These two women were once friends, and Lady Bridgerton points out, there's no reason for us to talk. It's not like you'd reveal any late secrets that you might have. Lady Bridgerton's still pretty pissed off, and she does blame Lady Danbury because Lady Danbury did know about the secret. As soon as Penelope shows up, she goes and finds Eloise, and they start comparing weddings between this one and last year's with Daphne. This segues into a conversation about Whistledown and how much power she has, and when Penelope points out that Whistledown writes about everybody, Eloise says, no, she doesn't. I mean, there are people outside of the town that deserve attention too. And Penelope grabs her to the side and says, are you speaking of Theo? Are you still seeing him? And while Eloise knows about Penelope's warning, and she does know that it'd be foolish for her to continue to see Theo, she's continued to do so anyway. She does reassure Penelope, though, that it's only his thoughts that she's interested in, which is something that I hear constantly from women. Upstairs, Benedict is helping Antony get ready, but that's when Daphne walks in. Daphne knows that Antony's making a mistake. And Antony says, we can't turn back now. It's too late in the process, and it would ruin not only her family, but ours as well. But Daphne didn't come here to talk about Edwina. Daphne came here to talk about Kate. It's obvious to most women that see the two interact that there's something going on between the two. Antony assures Daphne that both have decided nothing can go on between the two. The conversation turns pretty contentious when Daphne brings up their father and how much Antony has changed since his death. Daphne pointing out that he can choose to be happy, and Antony bringing up the fact that he's not going to give in to love. It ends with Daphne telling him that she mourns for him because the things that he does that he thinks will bring him respect actually make the entire family pity him. This is just yet another decision that makes them pity him. Now it's just time to make the walk down the aisle. But as the priest is saying the vows, it comes time for Antony to repeat them. But Antony isn't listening to the priest because he can't stop staring at Kate. It's something that Edwina notices. That's the look that she was talking about, the look that the Viscount does not give her. It finally all clicks for Edwina, and she runs out of the room yelling, "I need a moment." For the time being, the wedding is put on pause as Lady Mary and Kate chase after Edwina to find out what the hell is going on. But as Lady Mary is trying to de-escalate the situation and calm Edwina down, Edwina has had enough. She yells, "I want the truth. I can't believe you. All this time, you had feelings for him and you wanted him for yourself." Edwina feels like this is yet another lie by her sister. She finally asks Kate, "Do you love him?" And Kate doesn't say a word. Lady Mary takes Edwina out of the room to get away from it all. But before she leaves, Lady Mary does yell at Kate for keeping so much from her. Kate ends up going and hiding in a closet and crying. The Bridgerton family heads to another room in the castle, thinking that Edwina will eventually come to her senses. The only one who's not real assured of that is Eloise, who says that maybe Edwina just realized that marriage is a prison. But it's Benedict who points out that maybe just Antony needs to be left alone. Now, this is pretty embarrassing for the queen as well. She's the one hosting this wedding. She doesn't always do that. So she calls Lady Danbury into a private room to have a conversation with her about what exactly is happening. The big concern for the queen isn't the fact that these two aren't going to get married. She doesn't really care about that. It's more of the look of the queen's diamond of the season getting cold feet in her palace, and what Lady Whistledown will eventually write, which is blaming the queen. When Danbury starts pointing out that maybe they're in a situation that can't be salvaged, the queen says, "It better be salvaged. You vouched for this family. I never would have thought of making Edwina the diamond of the season had it not been for you. This is much your fault as it is anyone's." Danbury says that she'll go find Edwina and figure out something. And in the meantime, the queen instructs the guards to not let anyone leave. The nuptials will continue to go on shortly. So all of the wedding guests head out to the garden for the time being. And rumors are swirling among the guests on what they just witnessed. And this scandal could be exactly what the Featheringtons need. With everybody outside, they just need to redirect everybody's attention to Prudence, which isn't going to be easy. So Lady Featherington goes over and instructs Prudence to go and show it off. Lord Featherington does his part. It doesn't take long for those men to find their way to Lord Featherington. He starts pitching them about these ruby mines, but there's one man that is a little hesitant to buy into this scheme, and it's Mondrich. You can't blame him. He's weary of anyone with the Featherington name after what happened last season. Both Mondrich and Featherington end up trading subtle insults back and forth until eventually Featherington just excused himself from the conversation. He did so because Lady Featherington wanted to talk to him. She wants an update on if he's come to any agreements, and the answer is no, but he's close. And she tries to put his feet to the fire because they may never have a situation quite like this again. The whole town is out there. She's also realized that what they need to do is focus on people who aren't real beloved in the town. That way, when the money doesn't roll in like they're expecting, it won't be that big of a deal. Nobody will think poorly of them. Lord Featherington asks, who makes that list? And it's basically everybody but the Bridgertons. Jack starts once again hitting on Lady Featherington. He's attracted to her because he feels like he just met the female version of himself. That they could be partners, but also partners in another way. The other Featherington, Penelope, gets found by Eloise, who's been thinking about their conversation earlier in the day. Eloise did think that the bond that she had with Theo was just intellectual, but now she's thinking maybe it's more than that. She needs to find out what Theo feels in the situation. Penelope thinks this is a terrible idea for many reasons, but also warns Eloise of what happened to Lady Mary when she married, quote, beneath her. Eloise shoots back, "I'm not talking about marriage, Pen. I just want to know." When Penelope pressures Eloise on why she has to know, Eloise says, "I can accept certain mysteries, but this one I can actually find out yes or no." The not knowing is torment. So at the behest of her best friend, Eloise does end up sneaking out of that party because she figures no one's going to notice I'm not here anyway. and heading to go see Theo. She gently poses the question to Theo. Do you think about me? I mean, because sometimes I think about you. And the answer to that question is yes. Theo goes inside the printing press and has a bunch of books waiting for her. He tells her, I thought you might like these. Eloise is completely unaware, though, that one of the king's men followed her there and is watching her every move. Back in the castle, though, Antony feels like it's best if he goes and has a conversation with Edwina. But Edwina says, please tell me you're not going to come in here and tell me more lies. So he more pitches her on the roles that they have in society and how they simply just align for this marriage. He doesn't care about the lack of a dowry. He doesn't care about the insults of the Sheffields. But he also can't say yes when she asks, is that because you love me? He continues to try to pitch Edwina on why they should continue to go on with the marriage. And eventually Edwina has to ask, what role is Kate going to play in all this? He tells her she's going to have no place in our future. Once we marry, she's returning to India. She tells Antony, I'm going to need a little more time to think about what I want to do. As Antony is leaving the room that Edwina's in, he runs into Kate. Kate doesn't really want to talk to him, but Antony follows her into the closet. He asks Kate to do something to salvage this wedding. And Kate tells him there's not a lot she can do at this point. Edwina has simply figured everything out. But she does go and have a conversation with Edwina, apologizing for everything, admitting that at one point she did have feelings for the Vi account, but that doesn't matter anymore. Kate basically makes the same pitch to Edwina as Antony made. You deserve this. And what Edwina can't figure out is, why doesn't Kate deserve this? Those two are clearly in love. And the reason that Kate gives is the fact that she's been working towards this her entire life, finding Edwina a match, making Edwina happy before she thinks of herself. In a way, her lack of being selfish has made her selfish. The conversation and apology attempt from Kate does not go over well. Edwina even brings up the fact that they're not sisters. They're half-sisters. She ends the conversation by saying, if I go through with this wedding, it'll have nothing to do with you. But she still needs more time. The apology that Kate gave to Edwina isn't the only apology that goes down that day. With everybody kind of in a holding pattern, Lady Danbury ends up running into Lady Bridgerton and apologizing for what happened at the dinner. But these two are old friends, and it doesn't take long for them to rekindle their friendship and actually have a good laugh about the situation. They're both in a crappy spot. You might as well laugh about it. The two women then go and talk to the Queen, but the Queen is steadfast that this wedding better be going down. And the problem is, neither Danbury or Bridgerton have an answer on that. As they're telling the Queen that it is Edwina's decision, Edwina comes in, and they start trying to do what Danbury and Bridgerton were doing. Kiss the Queen's ass, thanking her profusely, but the Queen is sick of it. She just wants the question answered. Are they getting married or not? Before Edwina can even answer, the King runs into the room. Everybody is shocked to see him. No one more so than the Queen. He starts talking about how he's late for the ceremony and starts apologizing to the Queen for being late. He's clearly confused, and when the Queen asks a bunch of her men to help the King back into his chambers, he gets really upset. That's when Edwina steps in. Edwina thinks that the King thinks it's his wedding day, so she starts telling him that the Queen is going to make an excellent queen, but for now, it's probably best that he rest. This works. He goes back into his chambers and closes the door. Everybody then leaves the room, and shortly after that, both Antony and Kate receive word that they're to meet in the same room that Antony was to marry Edwina in. With Kate, Edwina, and Antony in the same room together, she tells Antony that she can't marry him because Antony can't provide her with what she deserves. She then turns her attention to her sister, criticizing her for sticking with this notion that Kate has sacrificed her own happiness for Edwina's because Edwina has her own life. Kate shouldn't use Edwina as an excuse on why she isn't happy. Edwina then leaves the room and it's just Kate and Antony. Kate doesn't want to leave, but eventually she has to. She says her goodbyes, and then finally, after 6 freaking episodes, the two end up kissing. Took you long enough. In episode 7, the post-wedding whistle-down edition comes out, and just like the Queen had predicted, it sort of blames her for it. But one of the issues that she points out is the fact that neither the Schwarmers or the Bridgertons have made an official statement on the matter. It's leading everybody to make their own conclusions. Antony and Kate are both having trouble sleeping, and Edwina is still heartbroken. Even the Bridgerton kids can't help but joke around about the situation. This is all behind Antony's back, though. When he finally does come downstairs, his mother says that we have to act swiftly. Basically, we have to act like nothing's wrong with us. That way we can save face. Her solution? To head to the promenade as one, a family united. Antony's okay with it, and Eloise says, I'll meet you guys there. I have to go shopping. But when she heads outside, there's a carriage waiting for her. It's the Queen's. After one of the Queen's men caught her going to a printing press, The queen is now pretty certain that Eloise Bridgerton is Lady Whistledown. So she has a private conversation with Eloise in her carriage. She goes through all the reasons why she's convinced that Eloise is Lady Whistledown, including the fact that last season she had hired Eloise to find the identity of Whistledown and she came up empty. All of the evidence is pretty damning, but it's more so unfortunate because obviously Eloise isn't Whistledown. Eloise pleads this case to the queen, but she doesn't want to hear it. She tells Eloise, Lady Whistledown could be a real asset to the queen. But when Eloise says, I would love to, man, but I don't hold that power, the queen points out what a miserable life she really could hold for Eloise. Especially if the queen were to reveal that it was Eloise Bridgerton, because people would then seek revenge on Lady Whistledown. She points out that if the Bridgerton situation now seems bad, it would only get worse. She gives Eloise 3 days to consider her offer. And if Eloise doesn't, quote, come to her senses, she's going to squash her like a bug. Eloise is petrified. She knows that she's not Whistledown, but she doesn't have hard evidence. While Eloise was getting interrogated by the queen, the rest of the Bridgertons headed to the promenade, as did the Sharmas. And both families are having the same issue. They're trying to play it off like nothing's wrong, everything's okay. They simply had an amicable parting of the ways, but everybody that they try to talk to completely ignores them. Lady Featherington takes this opportunity to fire some shots at the Bridgertons, pointing out that she knows how Lady Bridgerton feels after what happened between Colin and Marina last season. The more and more that the Bridgertons and the Sharmas walk around the promenade, the more it becomes clear they don't have many allies. It causes both families to have a meeting post-promenade. The idea that they come up with is hosting a ball. There's no better opportunity for both families to show that there's nothing bad between them than hosting a ball together. It also gives Edwina the chance to find another suitor. Edwina says, well, a ball would work. I mean, Lord Bridgerton and my sister were really good at hiding their feelings for each other. I'm sure they can do it a little bit longer. But then Newton runs in. Both Kate and Antony tend to the dog, but then they can't stop staring at each other. Edwina sees it and says, was I really that blind? Yeah, girl. Yeah, you were. But this is more of a serious issue. Danbury suggests that both Kate and Antony stay on opposite sides of the room. And Lady Bridgerton makes mention of the fact that the only people that know about Kate and Antony are the people in that room. They want to keep it that way. So it wasn't a joke. They really do have to stay away from each other at this ball. When they get home, Lady Bridgerton asks Antony if the plan is going to be a problem for him, and he says no. But then she points out that they still have an issue. He still has nobody that he's supposed to marry. He asks her, you do realize I'm not the only Bridgerton boy, right? And when she asks, is this your plan to let your brothers marry before you? He freaks out, yelling, is this it? Do you want me to admit I made a mistake? I realize I failed. This plan will work. I'm sure you and Lady Danbury will make certain of it. But if you thought Antony was freaking out, it doesn't even compare to Eloise. She needs to talk to somebody about the situation, and who else but her best friend, Penelope. When Penelope hears about the queen and the conversation that she had with Eloise, now Penelope's freaking out too, but for completely different reasons. Eloise's main concern isn't even herself, it's Theo. She doesn't want to get him in trouble. She feels like if the queen saw her talk to him, then she might think that Theo has something to do with this. When Eloise mentions that she has to go warn him, Penelope says, no, you don't. That's crazy. You should stay far away from him. What you should do is wait for Lady Whistledown to print her next issue. That way the queen will know that you had nothing to do with it. But now with the information she has, Penelope also has to talk to somebody. And the person she goes and talks to is the modiste. When the modiste hears about it, she starts freaking out like the other two. Nobody's higher than the queen. And the agreement that she had with Penelope didn't mention anything about the queen. Penelope simply doesn't know what to do. It's not even like she can turn herself in. She doesn't know that the queen would actually believe her. She might think that it's just a friend trying to help another friend. Penelope then notices the modiste has a bunch of pictures up, and she tells Pen that she was planning on submit them to a revered house of dressmakers in France. Now with this going on, she doesn't know if that's such a good idea. Penelope promises that she will not sully the name of the modiste. That's when the modiste has an idea. She realizes the one thing a lady would never do is sully her own name. All Penelope has to do is write something about Eloise that she would never write about herself. If it's convincing enough, the queen will believe it. But in doing so, Penelope knows that she could be ruining her friend. She doesn't want to do that. The next day, the Bridgertons and the Sharmas head to an art exhibit as a united front, once again trying to prove to the entire town that there's nothing wrong with them. It still doesn't work. Every room they enter in, the art isn't the main attraction, they are. It's pretty awkward, but as Lady Bridgerton mentions, if we can put the wedding behind us, so can these people. To further prove that there's no bad blood between the two families, Antony takes Lady Mary around the exhibit, and he uses this chance to apologize to Lady Mary, saying, "I just want to assure you, I had no intentions of ever hurting Edwina." Lady Mary tells Antony she can't blame him for all of this. She has to take some blame herself. When her husband died, it should have been her that was handling the books, not Kate. She put Kate in a tough spot. Antony ends his conversation with Lady Mary and runs into Kate. He has to talk to her covertly. Kate really isn't in the mood to talk. She's just gotten done talking to Edwina, and that conversation did not go well. Edwina let her know that everybody is swallowing the story that they decided to call off the wedding amicably, but she still isn't ready to forgive her sister. So when Antony comes over to talk, she's not interested. Antony brings up the fact that they kissed, and she says, "We didn't. You were bound to my sister. There's no world where we could kiss. The fact is, we did a terrible thing. We should be ashamed of what we did." One family who is noticeably absent from the museum is the Featheringtons. That's because Jack Featherington has spent his day at Mondrich's Gentlemen's Club, which is empty. But just because it's empty doesn't mean Mondrich is going to kiss Featherington's ass. He still is bitter about what happened with the previous Lord Featherington. And the conversation between Mondrich and Jack gets contentious when Jack all but brings that up. He was looking into his cousin's old files, and he saw some peculiar transactions to Mondrich. Jack's message to Mondrich is clear. "I don't need to tell your secrets if you don't tell mine. Keep your mouth shut about the rubies. If you think my ventures are suspect, don't tell anybody." He then heads home. As Penelope is trying to think of exactly what to write about Eloise in her next edition of Whistledown, she overhears a familiar voice down the hall, and it's Colin. She walks out and is surprised to see Colin in conversation with cousin Jack. Turns out that Colin is thinking about investing in Jack's ruby mines. Colin turns his attention from Jack to Penelope, and then when Lady Featherington comes downstairs and says, "Oh, I didn't know we had a caller," Colin makes it very clear that he's not there to court Penelope, and he leaves. But when Lady Featherington finds out exactly what Colin was up to, she goes and has a conversation with Jack about the situation because she told Jack to stay away from the Bridgertons. Jack's excuse is that Colin is so eager to invest, he had to basically take the meeting. They then both get the invitation to the Bridgerton ball. And down the street, that is exactly what the Bridgertons are focused on, at least Lady Bridgerton. Most of the kids don't want to go through this farce. Eloise, on the other hand, is just hyper-focused on the latest edition of Whistledown. She's not had a good day. She had that awful meeting with the Queen. She talked to Penelope and defied her suggestion not to go talk to Theo. She did so to warn him, but it backfired. Theo didn't want to talk to her and basically dumped her. So when Penelope shows up later that day to the Bridgerton household, Eloise is relieved because she has to talk to her. She's decided that she is going to accept the Queen's offer and admit that she is Whistledown. She'll just put out a counterfeit paper and own it. When Penelope brings up Theo's name, Eloise says, "I don't want to speak his name ever again. I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for my family." Penelope asks her what's going to happen when the real Lady Whistledown decides to publish. But Eloise is done caring about the real Lady Whistledown. She's got 2 days to consider the Queen's offer. In Eloise's mind, this will give her more time to find the real writer. She then thanks Penelope for being a loyal friend and heads to get ready for that night's ball. But Penelope is in knots because the latest edition of Whistledown is coming out. Eloise just doesn't know what's in it. That night, the Bridgertons, the Sharmas, Lady Danbury, they all congregate in the Bridgerton household, and they are the only ones there. Antony's not going to waste that night. They've got a band after all. He's going to dance. And everybody has fun dancing with each other. For one song, it's like a wedding was never called off. But then they find out exactly why nobody showed up to their ball. Because the latest edition of Whistledown has come out, and it does not speak well of Eloise. The drama that Whistledown wrote about was that Eloise was going to the bad neighborhoods, unchaperoned, and talking to radicals. Eloise is sick to her stomach. So is Penelope, because she knows what she did. Her mother is thrilled. She no longer cares about the Bridgerton social standing. She instructs Jack to seal the agreement with Colin. So the Bridgerton ball is a bust. And even after having fun dancing with each other, Edwina is still not ready to forgive Kate. Kate heads out to the garden, but she's quickly joined by Antony. I'm going to save you a lot of the drama here. They start fighting. They get closer. They don't kiss this time, though. They bang each other's brains out. Something about that garden gets people crazy horny. They even fall asleep in it, which is dangerous because anyone could find them. But when Antony wakes up, he's alone. That's because Kate ran back home. But she has Antony's lap hog right on her mind. That thrust game was on point. And after sullying her, Antony knows what he has to do. He has to propose. He grabs his mother's ring, heads on over to Lady Danbury's house, waits for Kate, but he's told that she isn't there, and he figures that she must be off riding. It doesn't take him long to quickly find her. He chases after her, but it's poor riding conditions. It's raining out. And when Kate goes to jump over some logs, the horse doesn't. The horse bucks up and throws Kate off, where Kate hits her head and is knocked out unconscious. And in episode 8, Antony picks up Kate and rushes her back to the house. The doctor immediately starts tending, but Antony is beside himself. That's because he truly loves Kate, and he doesn't know if she's going to be all right or not. To make matters worse, he feels like it's his fault that she's lying there. So he ends up storming out of the house. Days later, Kate still has not woken up, and neither has Lady Whistledown. She hasn't written since her previous post about Eloise. To quote Penelope, Lady Whistledown is done ruining the lives of others. And Penelope wants to go visit her friend. She wants to see how she's doing, but Lady Featherington tells her, you are not to step foot in that household. She then gets an update from Lord Featherington about how close the deal with Colin is. It's very close. Because of this, Lady Featherington wants to throw a big celebration. She's going to throw a ball, and she's going to call it the Featherington Ball. Very creative. She's going to invite the entire town, including the Bridgertons and the Sharmas. She figures worst case scenario, they don't show up. Best case scenario, they do, and the drama will ensue. Down the street, a ball is the farthest thing on the Bridgertons' mind. Lady Bridgerton continues to send flowers to Kate's bedside. But then Antony walks in the room like a tornado. That's because he was recently doing the books and saw that Colin took out a sizable amount of money. Forces Colin to admit that he is thinking about doing an investment with Lord Featherington. Antony flips out, and when Eloise and Benedict come to Colin's defense, he insults them. He basically insults everybody in the room until eventually they all get up and leave. Everybody except his mother. She's worried about him. He has yet to visit Kate, and while he says he doesn't have the time, she thinks he should make time. Later that day, the Bridgertons get a package delivered to him, but it's surprisingly for Eloise. When Eloise opens it up, it's books, and there's a handwritten note inside from Theo. He admits in the note that he knew that Lady Whistledown was using the printing shop to print her pamphlets. And that pisses off Eloise. She covertly heads to the printing press, but Theo explains, I couldn't tell you. I didn't know she was still watching me, but she's taking her business elsewhere. I didn't want to end things with you, but I also didn't want her to see the two of us together. I thought if she did, she'd write cruelly of you, which Eloise points out, a little late for that. Eloise doesn't really care about apologies from Theo. She wants to know who Whistledown is. So she tells him, I want to know everything you know. He tells her the manuscripts came twice a week and they were sewn in silks. There's only one person that could possibly be, and it's the modiste. After leaving the printing press, she heads to go visit with Madame Delacroix. She accuses her of working with Whistledown, and Madame Delacroix is taken off guard but also denies it, knowing full well that Eloise doesn't really have any hard evidence. It is making Madame Delacroix extremely uncomfortable, though. Luckily for her, the conversation is interrupted when the Featheringtons walk in. But when Penelope sees Eloise talking with Madame Delacroix, she has an idea of what it could be about. She pulls Eloise outside, where Eloise tells Penelope that the print shop where Theo worked was where Whistledown printed her pamphlets. She is positive that she is well on her way to finding the true identity of Whistledown. Penelope then reveals to Eloise that there has been gossip of her talking to Theo for weeks. Eloise Bridgerton, a man from the lower class, and by Lady Whistledown not writing, she's doing Eloise a favor. All of this takes Eloise completely off guard because she thought she was being discreet. Penelope tells Eloise that she is sick of hearing about Whistledown because Eloise has been obsessed. She has to move on. But this plea is more so in hopes that Eloise does move on, so she doesn't find out that Lady Whistledown is her. She doesn't listen. That night, she heads to the printing press, and along with Theo, she starts combing over documents looking for any clues that could lead her to the true identity of Whistledown. When a bunch of papers fall, the two get down and pick them up, but they get really close to each other. Eloise doesn't know quite what to do, so she tells Theo, this whole thing, we can't do this. We can't meet like this anymore. He reminds her that this was her idea, and as she's packing up all of the Whistledown letters, she starts apologizing to him for wasting his time. He asks her, are you? Or are you dropping out of this for other reasons? She tells Theo that people are already talking about them, and because of that, she has to leave. She couldn't live with herself if Theo was the one who had to face the consequences of their relationship. Theo doesn't take it well. He says, "It's okay. You dipped your toes into my waters trying to make yourself feel better about the advantages of your birth. Now you can go back to your life and I can go back to mine." You hate to see young love end so soon. But the lack of Whistledown's pamphlets are leaving the town thirsty for information and gossip. Mainly the Queen. She calls Lady Danbury because she is curious as to why the wedding didn't take place. Danbury, however, tells the Queen, "I'm not sure. We're all just worried about Kate at the moment." But if Lady Whistledown were currently writing, she might be writing about the scheme that is going on with the Featheringtons. Okay, probably not because that would affect Penelope Featherington, but I needed a segue. This is it. That night, Lord Featherington meets up with Colin at Mondrich's Gentleman's Club to seal the deal. Even though his wife tells him don't get involved, Mondrich can't help himself. He knows that Featherington is running a scheme, and he wants to warn Colin about it. He tells Colin, "This dude is a swindler. It's a trait that he shares with his cousin. I got wrapped up in it, and I'm not proud of it, but I don't want you to." But to Mondrich's surprise, Colin stands up and defends the Featheringtons, telling Mondrich that he should mind his own business, and this is probably why he has nobody in his gentleman's club. And then he tells Featherington, "Let's take our business elsewhere." After further talks, Lord Featherington comes home victorious. He bursts through Lady Featherington's bedroom door and says, "Colin Bridgerton is taking the bait." But there is an issue. He tells Lady Featherington, "We've basically exhausted the entire town, and eventually they're going to want some return on their investment. We're not going to have it. We should think about heading back to the Americas." Lady Featherington has no interest in that whatsoever, but Lord Featherington sells it to her that she could be the Queen of America. They then get dangerously close to kissing until Lord Featherington actually pulls away. And it seems like he's leaving Lady Featherington wanting a little bit more. The next day, with Edwina by her side, Kate finally wakes up. At this point, Edwina has forgiven her sister for what happened. A close call with death will do that. When Kate wakes up, Edwina is beside herself in glee. They let her know that Lord Bridgerton was the one who rescued her. But when she asks, "Has he visited me since?" they have to say, "No, he hasn't." Word of Kate waking up quickly spreads throughout the town, and Lady Bridgerton rushes in to tell her son. As soon as Anthony finds out that Kate is okay, he starts crying. He is so relieved. Then Lady Bridgerton starts crying because she starts apologizing to Anthony for the fact that it was he who was with his father the day that he died, and it was he who had to look after the family while she was in mourning. When there's a lull in the conversation, Anthony tells his mother, "I don't know if I can go visit her." And Lady Bridgerton tells her son, "Losing your father was the toughest moment of my life, but I take solace in knowing that I would still marry him every single day of the week. I would feel the same pain I felt all over again, just to spend 5 minutes with him. That is real, true love. Do not lose her, Anthony." So Anthony heads on over. After they get some pleasantries out of the way, he tells her that morning he showed up looking to propose. He then pulls out the ring, but to his surprise, she says, "I'm returning to India. The moment I figure stuff out with Edwina, I'm gone. Lady Danbury has offered to sponsor my mother and my sister for another season. To become clear, I'm no help." He tells her that she's running away, and she tells him to go. The next morning, Kate actually makes it out of bed. The first person she goes to visit is Edwina. She tells her, "I know that earning back your trust isn't going to be easy, but I'm willing to try." Edwina then starts asking the tough questions to Kate about Kate and Anthony's relationship, and Kate is honest with her. She wasn't lying to Edwina, she was lying to herself. Both women then agree to go to the Featherington ball that night. But later in the night, Kate starts getting cold feet. She doesn't even know if she wants to go. And when Lady Mary walks into her room and Kate tells her, "I don't know if I'm going to this thing," Lady Mary says, "I really hope that's not because you want to flee from what's difficult. I know this feeling. It's never the wise choice." Kate starts crying, and Lady Mary reminds her, "Edwina forgave you. I forgave you." But Kate cuts her off and says, "I didn't forgive myself." The conversation goes into what burden Kate had to deal with as Lady Mary was grieving her husband, and Lady Mary points out that was your father. You had already lost your mother. This prompts Kate to mention that Lady Mary took her in and treated her no different than Edwina. She felt like she owed her. And Lady Mary says, "You owed me nothing. You never had to earn your place in this family. I loved you from the day I met you. And love is not something that is owed. You came into my life as a daughter, and I never saw you as anything else. It makes me sad to think that you don't deserve love in this world." Kate then tells Lady Mary about Antony coming and proposing to her that day. She says, I couldn't say yes. He was asking me out of mere obligation after the two of us, but she stops herself. Kate tells her mother, I don't think he loves me. Both women are crying and they give each other a hug. And Benedict has returned home for that ball, but it's not just for that reason. He found out that Antony had made a sizable donation to the art school on his behalf, and that's what got him in, not his merit. He got so mad that he left school. The first person he sees when he gets home is a very sad Eloise Bridgerton. She looks like she went through heartbreak. So Benedict sits by her side. He reveals to his sister why he left the academy. And she tells him that doesn't mean that you wouldn't have been accepted on your own. She tells her brother that she really doesn't want to go to this ball. So Benedict says, I'll escort you. Back in the house upstairs, Antony is just sitting with his thoughts about what went down that day when Gregory walks in. He had a tough day with his Latin teacher, but then he notices a painting of his father, and he tells Antony that he didn't even know his father. That causes him to ask Antony, what was father like? And Antony is telling Gregory all about their dad, while they unknowingly are getting eavesdropped by their mother. A little while later, everybody heads off to the ball, and this is a big ball that the Featheringtons are throwing. The Queen even arrives. It gets a little awkward when Eloise shows up and finds Penelope. They don't really know what to talk about, but eventually Eloise reveals to Penelope that she was right about Theo. It was a mistake ever getting involved with him. She thanks Penn for being a really good friend. But then Penn pulls her aside and starts pointing out all of the gossipy things that she's witnessed that night. And Eloise recognizes the words. It's at that moment that Eloise has figured out who Lady Whistledown is. But she doesn't call her friend on it right away. She needs proof. So she covertly heads up to her bedroom and starts looking for it. While Eloise is looking for the proof she needs, the Sharmas show up, and they start dancing like nobody's watching. Two other people who are dancing with each other are Colin and Cressida. Cressida is wearing one of Jack's ruby necklaces that he gifted her, and Colin says, there's a problem with it. Your clasp is broken. All right, I'll fix it. He then goes over and grabs Penn, and they go into a separate room. And they're alone, so it's very taboo. He tells Penelope, I've looked into your cousin, and I think he's a scam artist. Before he can even explain himself, Lady and Lord Featherington come through the door and demand to know what is going on. But Colin isn't going to let Lady Featherington guilt-trip him into a marriage like she did with Lord Featherington and Prudence. He puts down the necklace and smashes it, proving that it's nothing more than glass. He calls Lord Featherington out on the fact that he's running a scam and demands that he return all the money. But the one thing he doesn't do is blame the Featherington women. Because the one thing that Colin has wrong is the fact that Lord Featherington is, quote, taking advantage of them because they don't have a father or a husband to protect them. Colin and Penelope then leave the room. And once they do, Lord Featherington tells Lady Featherington, the money is packed. We got to leave for America tonight. She asks him, what am I going to do about my daughters? And he says, we'll send for them after, or they can come with us. But in some ways, this will be a relief. I'm not going to have to go through my proposed marriage to Prudence. There'll be other possibilities. And then he kisses her. Outside on the dance floor, Penelope and Colin are dancing their little hearts out. Penelope is absolutely swooning over Colin. And when Colin tells her, I'll always look after you, Pen. You are special to me. She's about ready to jump into bed with him right then and there. She is riding high. She heads up to her room with the biggest cheesing smile on her face. But it quickly vanishes when she opens up her door to see that her place has been ransacked. And there's Eloise Bridgerton. She's found the Whistledown notes, and she's found all the money. She feels completely betrayed. Penelope has no choice but to admit to it, but it's hard to really sell to your friend the reason why you wrote those nasty things in the last edition of Whistledown was to protect her. The two women say some things to each other that they'll probably want back, and Eloise leaves Penelope crying. Eloise heads back downstairs to the ball, where Edwina and Kate find themselves on the sidelines, and Kate cannot take her eyes off of Antony. Edwina says, you're not going to be able to avoid him all night, and you shouldn't try to, not on my behalf. She all but pushes her sister into Bridgerton's arms. Antony starts talking about maybe they should keep their distance, but she says, maybe I shouldn't. So they start dancing to a classical version of Wrecking Ball, which is an all-time banger. But everybody is basically staring at them. It's quite scandalous, which is something that Lady Cowper mentions. People near the Queen start asking if that's why Edwina had abandoned Antony on her wedding day. And without Lady Whistledown writing anything, the Queen lies, saying, oh, no, child, that wedding didn't take place because I didn't want it to. Edwina then does her part, steps forward and says, I think they look beautiful. And the Queen agrees. She then looks Edwina up and down and asks, have I told you about my nephew? he's a prince. So there might be still hope for Edwina yet. When the song is over, the queen walks by the two, gives an approving nod, but then everybody has to head out because there's more entertainment outside. Fireworks. But when the entire place is cleared out, Lord Featherington turns to Lady Featherington and says, "This is great, let's go." But she says no. "I've had the help pack your bags, and I've given you enough money to get to the States. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to leave, and we're going to say that we were scammed. You took everybody's money and you ran. We keep our dignity, but we get rid of you." This completely takes Lord Featherington off guard. After all, they were a team. But she points out no one's going to believe that Lord Featherington needed a woman's help to construct this master plan. And she already has a team. It's her 3 daughters. Lady Featherington is going to survive on the rest of the money they scammed everybody out of. It's a perfect plan. Lord Featherington knows it. He has no choice but to leave. She also had Farley forge his signature on a document stating that as soon as one of her girls has a son, the estate is going to pass to him. So score 1 for Lady Featherington. One of those 3 daughters is having a tough night, and it's about to get more difficult for her. Penelope heads out in the garden, and she overhears a bunch of the guys laughing, and that includes Colin. Lord Fife tells Colin, "I saw you dancing with Penelope Featherington. Is there anything there?" And she overhears Colin say, "No, I would never dream of courting Penelope Featherington. Not in your wildest fantasies would I do that." So she lost her best friend, and she lost the love of her life. After the ball, Colin has something to do, though. He needs to make amends. He brings all of his buddies over to Mondrich's Gentlemen's Club and apologizes to Mondrich for how he acted, but explains that he needs to do so to earn Lord Featherington's trust. To show a debt of gratitude, he told all of his buddies that this is a place that is run by an honorable man. His brothers, though, are still back at the party. Benedict walks up to Antony before the fireworks set off, and he tells him, "I left the academy. I found out what you did. You were trying to help, but it was misguided. You sensed the truth, which is I'm simply not good enough." Antony cuts him off and says, "Benedict, you're beginning to sound like me. If you want to paint, paint. It's one of your many talents. Another one is you're able to see what people need before they see it themselves." He's talking about his relationship with Kate. Benedict saw it long ago. He thanks his brother for trying to show him the light, but he is unable to return the favor. Benedict does end up leaving the academy. Antony then goes off and tries to find Kate. He asks her if she's still planning to leave for India, and the answer to that is yes. He makes the pitch that she should marry him, and at first she fights it, but eventually she gives in. They share a lovely kiss under the fireworks, and not too long later, they're man and wife enjoying another rousing game of croquet, or whatever the hell you want to call it. And that is the end of Bridgerton Season 2. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this sucked. If you leave a comment in the comment section and I don't get back to it, don't take it personally. I usually avoid the comment section because when people point out that one mistake that you made, i.e. forgetting the one Bridgerton daughter that never shows up in the show, it just pisses me off. So I just avoid it at all costs. But I do appreciate you stopping by. Also, I have merch. Go buy a t-shirt. I have bills to pay.